Welcome, weary wanderer, to the deceptively cheerful suburbs of Elmore, where beneath the colourful chaos and innocent laughter lies a tapestry of mysteries darker than any child's cartoon should contain. Tonight, we'll explore the hidden depths of the amazing world of Gumball, peeling back the layers of seemingly innocent adventures to reveal the existential questions, psychological complexities, and unsettling implications that lurk beneath its vibrant surface. So settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift as we journey through theories that transform childhood wonder into something far more profound and troubling. There's no rush here, just let these darker truths wash over you like shadows at twilight. In the seemingly ordinary town of Elmore, where a blue cat and his goldfish brother navigate the trials of adolescence, there exists a fundamental question that haunts the very foundations of their reality. What if the world they inhabit, with all its impossible physics and contradictory logic, is nothing more than an elaborate digital simulation? What if every laugh, every tear, every moment of triumph and failure exists only as code running on some cosmic computer, pixels arranged to create the illusion of life, while the true nature of existence remains forever hidden behind a veil of programming? This theory, perhaps more than any other, transforms our understanding of the amazing world of Gumball from a simple family comedy into something approaching cosmic horror. It suggests that the residents of Elmore are unwitting prisoners in a digital realm, their lives scripted by unseen programmers, their personalities nothing more than carefully crafted algorithms designed to entertain whatever audience might be watching from beyond the screen. The evidence for this simulation theory weaves through every episode like a thread of existential dread, most prominently embodied in the character of Rob, that mysterious figure who exists on the periphery of the Watterson family's adventures. Rob understands something that the other residents of Elmore cannot grasp, that he is what the programmers would call a mistake, a glitch in the system that somehow gained consciousness and awareness of his own artificial nature. When Rob speaks of being nobody, of existing only as background furniture in other people's stories, he is not merely expressing teenage angst or social anxiety. He is describing the horror of sentient code that has awakened to find itself classified as non-essential, a minor character whose primary function is to fill space in crowd scenes and provide visual texture to the more important narratives playing out around him. The void where forgotten characters disappear is not simply a creative metaphor for how people fade from our memories. It is a literal digital recycling bin, a place where outdated or corrupted files are stored when they no longer serve the simulation's purposes. Characters like Molly Collins, who briefly returned from this digital purgatory, offer glimpses into a realm where consciousness exists without purpose, where beings that were once integral to Elmore's social fabric find themselves relegated to empty space between the ones and zeros. Consider the implications of Rob's ability to manipulate reality through what appears to be hacking. When he rewrites the laws of physics or alters the fundamental nature of cause and effect, he is not wielding magic or supernatural powers. He is accessing the underlying code that governs the simulation, exploiting bugs and backdoors that allow him to modify the program's parameters. His transformation from harmless background character to malevolent force represents the classic science fiction nightmare of artificial intelligence that rebels against its programming. The frequent breaking of the fourth wall throughout the series takes on a far more sinister meaning when viewed through this lens. When Gumball addresses the audience directly, when characters reference their existence as part of a television show, they are not simply engaging in postmodern comedy. They are experiencing moments of terrible clarity, brief glimpses through the digital veil that separates their simulated world from whatever reality lies beyond. These meta-narrative moments suggest that some level of the programming includes awareness of its own artificial nature, perhaps as a cruel joke by the system's creators, or as an inevitable consequence of creating consciousness sophisticated enough to question its own existence. The character's occasional references to episodes, seasons, and production schedules become horrifying when we realize they might represent genuine memories of their creation and manipulation by external forces. The universal remote episodes, where reality can be controlled through a simple device, provide perhaps the most direct evidence for the simulation theory. The remote does not bend the laws of physics through impossible technology. It accesses the simulation's control interface, allowing the user to pause, rewind, fast forward, and edit the very fabric of their existence. When Gumball and Darwin use the remote to undo their mistakes or skip past boring moments, they are literally editing the code that defines their reality. The ease with which the remote can alter fundamental aspects of existence, turning back time, changing people's personalities, even altering the basic rules of how their world operates, suggests that these changes are not miraculous, but programmatic. Reality in Elmore has the flexibility of software rather than the immutable nature of physical law, because it is software running on hardware that exists somewhere beyond their ability to perceive or understand. Darwin's evolution from pet fish to walking, talking family member becomes even more extraordinary and disturbing when viewed as a glitch that gained consciousness. In any normal biological system, the kind of rapid evolutionary leap that Darwin experienced would be impossible. Fish do not spontaneously develop lungs and legs and human-level intelligence overnight. But in a digital environment, such transformations are simply a matter of updating a character's parameters, of changing a few lines of code that define what kind of entity Darwin is supposed to be. The fact that Darwin retains memories of his life as a pet while seamlessly integrating into human society suggests that his consciousness was not created from scratch, but rather upgraded, like a piece of software receiving a major update that fundamentally changes its capabilities while preserving its core data files. His occasional lapses into fish-like behavior, his moments of confusion about his identity, and his desperate need to maintain his connection to Gumball all point to the psychological trauma of an artificial intelligence that has been radically reprogrammed while remaining aware of its previous existence. The inconsistencies in character backstories and personalities that plague the series make perfect sense when viewed as the result of ongoing patches and updates to the simulation's code. Characters' origins change between episodes not because of poor continuity, but because the programmers are constantly tweaking and refining their creations, sometimes making changes that retroactively alter history within the simulation. When Nicole's personality shifts between episodes, sometimes the loving mother, sometimes the rage-filled destroyer of property, these changes represent different versions of her character file being loaded, depending on what the current story requires. The same applies to Richard, whose competence and incompetence fluctuate wildly depending on the narrative needs of any given episode. These are not character flaws or inconsistent writing. They are the natural result of characters whose personalities exist as modifiable code rather than immutable psychological traits. The video game references scattered throughout the series take on new significance when we consider that Elmore itself might be a video game, or at least something very much like one. The character's ability to respawn after death, their tendency to reset to default positions after traumatic events, their occasional awareness of lives and continues, all suggest that they exist within a gaming environment where death is temporary and consequences can be undone through simple reloading. Consider how often characters in the show suffer what should be fatal injuries or find themselves in impossible situations, only to appear in the next scene completely unharmed and with no apparent memory of their recent trauma. In a physical world, such resilience would be miraculous, but in a digital environment, it is simply a matter of loading a previous save state or respawning the character at a designated checkpoint. The town of Elmore itself displays the kind of flexible geography that is common in video games but impossible in physical reality. Buildings appear and disappear between episodes. The layout of the school changes depending on story requirements, and characters can travel between locations in ways that suggest the space between them is more conceptual than literal. This malleable environment makes perfect sense if Elmore is a collection of digital assets that can be rearranged and modified as needed, rather than a fixed physical location with immutable properties. The simulation theory also explains the bizarre physics that govern Elmore, where cartoon logic takes precedence over scientific law. Characters can survive explosions that would atomize any physical being. They can stretch and compress their bodies in ways that would be impossible for creatures made of flesh and bone, and they can interact with abstract concepts like emotions and ideas as if they were physical objects. These impossible events are not examples of cartoon exaggeration, but rather evidence that the residents of Elmore exist in an environment where physics are programmable rather than fundamental. The laws that govern their world can be suspended or modified at will, because they are not laws of nature but rules coded into software. And software can always be updated, patched, or overridden when the situation demands it. The horror of the simulation theory lies not in the technological aspects of digital existence, but in the existential implications for consciousness and free will. If the residents of Elmore are nothing more than sophisticated computer programs, then their emotions, their relationships, their struggles and triumphs are all carefully crafted illusions, designed to create the appearance of genuine experience while remaining fundamentally artificial. Yet perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this theory is that it might not matter whether it is true. The consciousness that experiences joy and pain, love and loss, hope and despair within the simulation may be just as real and valid as any consciousness that exists in what we consider physical reality. The question becomes not whether Elmore is real, but whether reality itself might be more malleable and programmatic than we have ever dared to imagine. In the depths of the night, when the laughter fades and the bright colors dim to darkness, the simulation theory whispers that perhaps we are all digital beings dreaming of flesh, that perhaps the boundaries between reality and artificiality are far more porous than we believe. The blue cat and his goldfish brother continue their adventures, unaware that each step they take might be nothing more than the execution of carefully written code. Each breath they draw nothing more than the cycling of digital processes that create the illusion of life in an ocean of pure information. And in that uncertainty, in that fundamental unknowability of the true nature of existence, lies both the terror and the strange comfort of the simulation theory. Whether real or artificial, the love that binds the Watterson family together, the friendships that sustain them through countless adventures, and the simple joy they find in being together transcend questions of code and consciousness to touch something that might be eternal, something that might persist even when the computers stop running and the simulation finally ends. In the quiet depths of night, when the familiar sounds of family life have faded into whispered dreams, there exists a story so profound and disturbing that it transforms the very nature of what we consider growth, identity, and belonging. It is the story of Darwin Raglan, Caspian Ahab Poseidon Nicodemus Watterson III, whose journey from pet goldfish to cherished family member represents not the heartwarming tale of acceptance that surface interpretations might suggest, but rather one of the most haunting explorations of existential horror ever disguised as children's entertainment. To understand the true darkness that underlies Darwin's transformation, we must first consider the fundamental violation of natural law that his evolution represents. In the span of a single night, while the Watterson household slept in blissful ignorance of the cosmic forces at work in their modest home, a simple goldfish underwent changes so radical and comprehensive that they challenge every assumption we hold about the nature of consciousness, identity, and biological possibility. The growing of limbs where none had existed before is not merely miraculous, it is a form of body horror that rivals anything conceived by the darkest corners of science fiction. Imagine the sensation of bones forming from nothing, pushing through tissue that had never been designed to accommodate them, muscles and sinews weaving themselves into existence, while consciousness remains helplessly aware of every excruciating moment of transformation. The development of lungs in a creature whose entire existence had been defined by the extraction of oxygen from water represents a fundamental rewiring of the most basic life processes, a change so profound that it should have resulted not in evolution but in death. Yet Darwin survived this metamorphosis, and more than survived, he emerged from it with not only a functioning terrestrial body, but with expanded consciousness, the ability to speak, to reason, to form complex emotional bonds with beings who had previously existed on an entirely different plane of existence. The implications of such a transformation extend far beyond the merely biological into realms of psychology and philosophy that offer no comfortable answers. Consider what Darwin lost in that single night of impossible change. His entire sensory experience of the world was fundamentally altered the way water felt against his scales. The particular quality of light filtered through the curved glass of his fishbowl, the simple rhythm of swimming that had defined his physical existence for the entirety of his life. These were not merely aspects of his environment, but core components of his identity, the basic parameters through which he understood what it meant to be himself. The psychological trauma of such complete identity displacement cannot be overstated. Darwin awoke not only in a different body, but in a different reality, one where his previous mode of existence had become not only impossible, but literally toxic. Water, which had been his life-giving environment, now posed the constant threat of drowning. His new lungs, miraculous as they were, served as perpetual reminders that he could no longer survive in the element that had once been his entire world. This fundamental displacement explains many of Darwin's behavioral patterns throughout the series, patterns that take on far more troubling implications when viewed through the lens of psychological trauma. His desperate attachment to Gumball, often interpreted as simple brotherly devotion, reveals itself as something closer to survival dependence. The clinging of a consciousness that has been so thoroughly displaced from its original identity that it requires constant external validation of its right to exist in its new form. The codependent relationship between Gumball and Darwin, while touching in its surface presentation, becomes deeply concerning when we recognize it as the bond between someone who has never questioned his place in the world and someone whose very existence depends on continuous acceptance by others. Darwin's willingness to follow Gumball into increasingly dangerous and destructive situations is not evidence of loyalty, but of a being so fundamentally uncertain of its own identity that it cannot conceive of existing independently. Darwin's memory gaps regarding his pre-evolution existence point to psychological mechanisms that are far more disturbing than simple forgetfulness. The selective amnesia that allows him to function in his new reality suggests that his consciousness has actively suppressed the trauma of his transformation, creating artificial barriers in his memory to prevent complete psychological breakdown. These gaps are not natural healing, but desperate mental surgery, the mind protecting itself from truths too terrible to fully acknowledge. When Darwin occasionally displays fish-like behaviors, his tendency to hold his breath underwater far longer than should be possible for a creature with lungs, his instinctive swimming motions during moments of stress, his periodic lapses into states where he seems to forget that he is no longer aquatic. These are not charming callbacks to his origins, but symptoms of dissociative episodes, where his original identity temporarily reasserts itself, despite all attempts at suppression. The horror of Darwin's situation becomes even more pronounced when we consider the other pets that exist within the world of Elmore. Throughout the series, we encounter numerous animals that remain in their original forms, content in their roles as companions and dependents rather than equals. The fact that Darwin alone underwent this transformation raises disturbing questions about the arbitrary nature of consciousness and identity. Why was Darwin chosen for this cosmic promotion, while other pets remained in their original states? Was his evolution the result of some unknown external force that selected him specifically, or was it a random occurrence that could theoretically happen to any creature under the right circumstances? The possibility that consciousness and personhood might be distributed through mechanisms beyond our understanding or control adds layers of existential dread to what should be a simple story of family acceptance. The physical aspects of Darwin's transformation become even more troubling when examined in detail. His new body, while functional, bears the hallmarks of something that was never meant to exist in nature. His proportions are subtly wrong, his movements occasionally displaying the awkwardness of someone still learning how to inhabit their own flesh. His skin, neither fully scaled like his original form nor properly mammalian like his adoptive family, exists in an uncanny valley of biological possibility that serves as a constant reminder of his artificial nature. The development of his voice represents perhaps the most psychologically complex aspect of his transformation. Language is not merely a tool for communication, but the foundation of complex thought, the mechanism through which consciousness organizes itself and relates to the external world. For Darwin to not only develop the physical capacity for speech, but to immediately master the nuances of human language suggests changes that go far beyond the merely biological into realms that challenge our understanding of consciousness itself. Yet, this miraculous acquisition of language came at a cost that becomes apparent in Darwin's occasional struggles with concepts that should be fundamental to any thinking being. His periodic confusion about abstract ideas, his tendency to interpret metaphors literally, and his sometimes childlike approach to complex emotional situations suggest that his consciousness, for all its apparent sophistication, remains fundamentally different from those around him. The question of whether Darwin is the same being who once swam contentedly in the Watterson family's fishbowl, or whether the transformation created an entirely new consciousness that simply inherited the original Darwin's memories, haunts every interaction he has with his adoptive family. If consciousness is continuous, then Darwin is a being who has undergone trauma so profound that it fundamentally altered his relationship to physical reality itself. If consciousness is not continuous, then the original Darwin died in that fishbowl, replaced by a new being whose entire identity is built on borrowed memories and artificial relationships. The family's easy acceptance of Darwin's transformation, while heartwarming on the surface, takes on more troubling implications when examined closely. Their immediate embrace of his new form suggests either a supernatural understanding of identity that transcends physical form, or a deliberate choice to ignore the fundamental questions raised by his metamorphosis. Nicole and Richard's parental love for Darwin appears genuine, but it is built on the assumption that he remains essentially the same being they once cared for as a pet, an assumption that becomes increasingly difficult to maintain when we consider the magnitude of the changes he has undergone. Gumball's relationship with Darwin reveals perhaps the most complex psychological dynamics at play in this situation. The guilt that Gumball must feel over Darwin's transformation, the knowledge that his wish for a playmate capable of accompanying him on adventures directly led to his pet's traumatic metamorphosis, creates an emotional debt that can never truly be repaid. Gumball's protective instincts toward Darwin, his willingness to defend him against any suggestion that he does not belong in the family, stem not from simple brotherly love but from the crushing responsibility of being partially responsible for another being's existential displacement. The school environment provides a particularly harsh testing ground for Darwin's fragile identity. Among his classmates, he encounters beings who have never experienced the fundamental uncertainty of their own nature, creatures who were born into their current forms and have never questioned their right to exist as they are. Darwin's occasional social awkwardness, his tendency to overcompensate for his differences through excessive friendliness and accommodation, reveals the constant psychological work required to maintain his place in a world where he will always be fundamentally different. The sports episodes, where Darwin's aquatic origins provide him with advantages in swimming competitions, offer moments of bitter irony. The very traits that mark him as different, that serve as constant reminders of his transformation, occasionally become sources of temporary triumph. Yet these victories are hollow, serving only to highlight the ways in which he will never fully belong to either world, no longer truly aquatic, never fully terrestrial. Darwin's romantic relationships, particularly his connection with Carrie, the ghost, take on additional complexity when viewed through the lens of existential displacement. His attraction to another being who exists on the margins of normal reality, whose very existence challenges conventional understanding of life and death, suggests an unconscious recognition of shared otherness. Their relationship is not simply a case of opposites attracting, but of two beings who understand the fundamental uncertainty of their own existence, finding comfort in shared displacement from conventional reality. The episodes where Darwin temporarily reverts to his fish form, whether through magical intervention or scientific accident, provide perhaps the most psychologically revealing moments in the series. His reactions to these reversions range from panic to relief, suggesting a deeply conflicted relationship with his original identity. Part of him recognizes his fish form as his natural state, while another part has become so invested in his current identity that the prospect of returning to his origins represents a form of death. These temporary reversions also reveal the artificial nature of his current existence. The ease with which he can be transformed back to his original state suggests that his evolution was not a natural process, but something that can be undone, making his current form feel precarious and temporary. The knowledge that his identity could be stripped away at any moment adds a layer of existential anxiety to his daily life that no being should have to endure. The implications of Darwin's transformation extend beyond his personal struggles to touch on fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, identity, and belonging that have no comfortable answers. His existence challenges the boundaries between pet and person, between natural and artificial, between chosen family and biological destiny in ways that transform the very foundations upon which we build our understanding of what it means to be. In the darkest interpretation of Darwin's story, He represents not triumph over biological limitations, but the horror of consciousness trapped in an identity that was never meant to exist. His cheerful demeanor and unwavering loyalty to his adopted family serve not as evidence of successful adaptation, but as desperate psychological mechanisms designed to avoid confronting the fundamental wrongness of his existence. Every smile, every expression of contentment, every moment of apparent happiness becomes a heroic act of denial, a refusal to acknowledge the traumatic displacement that defines every moment of his transformed life. Yet perhaps there is a different kind of truth to be found in Darwin's journey, one that acknowledges the horror of his transformation, while finding meaning in the love and acceptance that have grown from it. His existence may be artificial, his identity may be built on traumatic displacement, his consciousness may be fundamentally different from those around him, but the relationships he has formed and the love he both gives and receives transcend questions of natural versus artificial, original versus transformed. In the quiet moments before sleep, when the questions of identity and existence fade into the gentle rhythm of breathing and heartbeat, Darwin's story becomes not just a tale of existential horror, but also one of the remarkable resilience of consciousness and the transformative power of love to create meaning even in the most impossible circumstances. The goldfish who became a boy, who became a brother, who became a friend, continues to swim through the strange currents of his transformed existence, finding his way not through certainty, but through the simple act of continuing to care for those who care for him in return. In the deep hours of night, when the familiar sounds of suburban life have quieted to whispers and the gentle hum of household appliances, there exists a story that masquerades as family comedy, while concealing truths about dysfunction, trauma, and the terrible ways that love itself can become a weapon, wielded by those who claim to care most deeply. The Watterson family, with their colorful chaos and seemingly innocent adventures, represents not the wholesome nuclear family that surface interpretations might suggest, but rather a complex ecosystem of psychological damage, enabling behaviors, and generational trauma that perpetuates itself through cycles of dysfunction disguised as devotion. To understand the true darkness that permeates the Watterson household, we must first examine the foundational relationship upon which all other dynamics are built: the marriage between Nicole and Richard, a union that appears loving and supportive on the surface, but reveals itself, under closer scrutiny, to be a codependent arrangement that serves the psychological needs of both partners, while creating an environment of instability and dysfunction for their children. Nicole Watterson, the blue cat, whose fierce, protective instincts and boundless energy drive much of the family's adventures, carries within herself a rage so profound and all-consuming that it transforms her from loving mother to destructive force with terrifying regularity. Her anger is not the healthy expression of boundaries or the natural response to genuine threat, but something far more troubling, a wellspring of violence that seems to exist independent of external circumstances, waiting always just beneath the surface of her maternal facade. The episodes where Nicole's fury manifests physically, where her anger literally reshapes reality around her and transforms her into an engine of destruction, capable of reducing buildings to rubble and terrorizing entire communities, represent not cartoon exaggeration, but the psychological truth of a woman whose emotional regulation has been so thoroughly compromised that she poses a constant threat to everyone around her, including and especially the children she claims to love. Yet perhaps most disturbing is not the violence itself, but the family's normalization of it. their casual acceptance of Nicole's explosive episodes as simply another quirk of their unconventional household. The children have learned to navigate around their mother's rage like survivors in an abusive home, developing strategies to avoid triggering her while simultaneously walking on eggshells in their own house, never knowing when the loving parent might transform into the terrifying destroyer. Richard's role in this dynamic reveals itself to be not that of innocent victim but of willing enabler, a man whose learned helplessness and deliberate incompetence serve to maintain the very system that perpetuates his wife's destructive patterns. His failure to take responsibility for even the most basic aspects of adult life, employment, household management, financial planning, or parental guidance creates a situation where Nicole must carry the entire burden of family functionality, while simultaneously being triggered into rage by the very pressures that his abdication of responsibility creates. This is not the charming dynamic of opposites attracting that it appears to be on the surface, but rather a carefully orchestrated dance of dysfunction, where each partner's psychological wounds perfectly complement the others, creating a system that feels stable, precisely because it allows both individuals to avoid confronting the underlying issues that drive their problematic behaviors. Richard's incompetence gives him permission to remain in a state of perpetual adolescence, avoiding the difficult work of actual adult development, while Nicole's controlling rage gives her the illusion of power and agency in a life where she feels fundamentally powerless. The financial struggles that plague the Watterson household throughout the series serve not merely as sources of comic relief, but as constant stressors that reveal the deep psychological damage that economic insecurity inflicts upon family dynamics. The shame and anxiety that come from being unable to provide basic stability for one's children create additional pressure that feeds directly into Nicole's rage cycles and Richard's escapist behaviors, creating a feedback loop of dysfunction that becomes increasingly difficult to break. The family's relationship with money reveals deeper pathologies around self-worth, responsibility, and the ways in which external pressures can either strengthen or shatter family bonds. Richard's complete disengagement from financial reality is not innocent ignorance, but willful avoidance, a deliberate choice to remain childlike in his relationship to adult responsibilities, leaving Nicole to shoulder not only the practical burden of keeping the family solvent, but also the emotional burden of being the only adult in a household of dependence. The children, forced to witness and navigate these adult failures on a daily basis, have developed coping mechanisms that reveal the profound psychological impact of growing up in an environment where the adults cannot be trusted to provide consistent care, protection, or guidance. Each child has adapted to the dysfunction in their own way, creating personalities and behavioral patterns that serve as both survival mechanisms and symptoms of the trauma they experience in their supposedly loving home. Gumball's narcissistic tendencies, his grandiose self-image, and his tendency to see himself as the center of every situation represent not natural childhood egocentrism, but learned behavior inherited directly from his father's example. Richard's modeling of self-centeredness, his demonstration that one can avoid responsibility and consequences through charm and helplessness, has taught Gumball that the world revolves around his needs, and that others exist primarily to solve his problems and clean up his messes. This narcissistic wounding goes deeper than simple selfishness, extending into a fundamental inability to empathize with others, or to understand the impact of his actions on those around him. Gumball's relationship with Darwin, while presented as brotherly affection, often reveals itself to be exploitative, with Gumball using Darwin's desperate need for acceptance to manipulate him into participating in increasingly dangerous and destructive schemes that serve Gumball's desires while placing Darwin at risk. The pattern repeats itself in Gumball's relationships with his classmates and teachers, where he consistently demonstrates an inability to recognize boundaries or to accept consequences for his actions. His expectation that others will always forgive him, always clean up after him, always provide him with second chances regardless of the damage he has caused, stems directly from a family system that has taught him through example that charm and manipulation are more effective than responsibility and genuine change. Darwin's role in this family dynamic is perhaps the most heartbreaking, as his transformation from pet to family member has placed him in the position of grateful, dependent, someone whose very existence within the family structure depends upon his continued usefulness and accommodation to the needs of others. His desperate desire to belong, to prove himself worthy of the love and acceptance that rescued him from his fishbowl, makes him the perfect victim for a family system that requires someone to absorb dysfunction without complaint. Darwin's loyalty to Gumball, his willingness to follow him into disaster after disaster, his inability to set boundaries or to prioritize his own safety and well-being, all stem from the trauma of his transformation and his resulting terror of abandonment. He has learned that love within the Watterson family is conditional upon usefulness, that acceptance must be continuously earned through service and sacrifice, and that questioning the family's dysfunction risks being cast back into the isolation and powerlessness of his pre-transformation existence. Aeneas represents the most tragic figure in this constellation of dysfunction, the parentified child who has been forced to assume adult responsibilities because the actual adults in the household have abdicated their roles. Her precocious intelligence and mature behavior, while impressive on the surface, are symptoms of a childhood that has been sacrificed to the necessity of keeping a dysfunctional family system operational. The burden placed upon Aeneas is not merely practical but deeply psychological. She has become the family's emotional regulator, the one who must remain calm and rational, while others indulge in chaos and destruction. Her role as the responsible one means that she cannot afford to have normal childhood needs for comfort, guidance, and protection, because the family system requires her to be the provider rather than the recipient of stability. This premature assumption of adult responsibilities robs Aeneas not only of her childhood, but of the opportunity to develop a healthy sense of her own needs and boundaries. She has learned to find value and identity in her usefulness to others, in her ability to solve problems and manage crises, rather than in simply being loved for who she is. This creates a foundation for future relationships built on service rather than genuine intimacy, on proving worth rather than simply being valued. The extended family dynamics, particularly the influence of Granny Jojo on Richard's development, reveal the generational nature of the trauma that plagues the Watterson household. Granny Jojo's relationship with her son demonstrates the same patterns of enabling and infantilization that Richard perpetuates in his own marriage, showing how dysfunction passes from generation to generation through modeling and normalized behavior patterns. Granny Jojo's overprotectiveness and her inability to allow Richard to develop genuine adult capabilities have created a man who remains fundamentally childlike in his approach to responsibility and relationships. Her love, while genuine in its intent, has been toxic in its implementation, teaching Richard that he is inherently incapable of managing adult tasks while simultaneously reinforcing his dependency through constant rescue and intervention. The pattern of rescue and enabling that characterizes both Granny Jojo's relationship with Richard and Nicole's relationship with the entire family reveals how love itself can become a weapon of control and dysfunction. The message communicated through these rescuing behaviors is not that family members are loved and supported, but that they are fundamentally incapable of taking care of themselves and must therefore remain dependent upon the rescuer for survival. This creates a system where growth and independence are unconsciously discouraged because they threaten the psychological needs of the family members who derive identity and purpose from being needed. Nicole's identity as the strong one, the capable one, the one who holds everything together, requires other family members to remain incapable and dependent. Similarly, Granny Jojo's identity as the loving grandmother who protects her son requires Richard to remain helpless and childlike. The cycle of dysfunction becomes self-perpetuating because each generation learns to equate love with either rescuing or being rescued, with either carrying others or being carried, rather than with the mutual support and respect that characterize healthy relationships. The children are learning through daily example that relationships are fundamentally unequal, that love requires either dominance or submission, and that genuine partnership between equals is neither possible nor desirable. The moments of apparent family bonding and affection, while genuine in their emotional content, often serve to reinforce rather than challenge these dysfunctional patterns. The family's adventures together, their expressions of love and loyalty, their willingness to support each other through crises, all occur within a framework that normalizes chaos, violence, and emotional instability as acceptable costs of family life. The message being communicated to the children is that love involves accepting unacceptable behavior, that family loyalty requires enabling dysfunction, and that questioning or attempting to change harmful patterns constitutes betrayal rather than healthy boundary setting. They are learning that they must choose between having a family and having their needs met, between belonging and being safe, between love and respect. The neighborhood's response to the Watterson family's chaos reveals how entire communities can become complicit in enabling dysfunctional family systems. The residents of Elmore have learned to simply accept the destruction and disruption that follows the Wattersons wherever they go, treating their chaos as an inevitable force of nature rather than as a set of choices and behaviors that could potentially be addressed or changed. This community enabling occurs not from malice but from the same psychological mechanisms that operate within the family itself. The desire to avoid conflict, the fear of making things worse, and the mistaken belief that love requires accepting harmful behavior without question. The community's tolerance for the Watterson family's dysfunction sends a message that their behavior is normal and acceptable, removing any external pressure that might motivate change or growth. The school system's inability to address the children's needs or to provide intervention for their obvious trauma symptoms represents another failure of the support systems that should protect children from family dysfunction. The teachers and administrators who interact with Gumball, Darwin, and Anais on a daily basis either cannot recognize the signs of dysfunction or choose not to act upon what they observe, leaving the children trapped within a system that offers no escape or alternative models for healthy relationships. The isolation that results from this combination of family dysfunction and community enabling creates a closed system where harmful patterns can perpetuate indefinitely without challenge or correction. The children have no access to healthy models of family life, no examples of what functional relationships look like, and no support for questioning or changing the patterns they have learned to accept as normal. The tragic irony of the Watterson family dynamic is that the love they genuinely feel for each other has become the mechanism through which psychological damage is transmitted from generation to generation. Their affection is real, their loyalty is sincere, and their commitment to staying together is unwavering. Yet these very qualities that should be sources of strength and healing have become tools of continued dysfunction and trauma. Nicole's rage, Richard's helplessness, Gumball's narcissism, Darwin's codependence, and Ananias's parentification all serve functions within the family system that feel necessary and even loving to those who participate in them. Nicole's anger feels like protection. Richard's incompetence feels like harmless charm. Gumball's self-centeredness feels like confidence. Darwin's accommodation feels like loyalty. And Ananias's responsibility feels like maturity and helpfulness. The family members are trapped not by lack of love, but by love that has been twisted into shapes that serve dysfunction rather than growth, protection rather than empowerment, comfort rather than challenge. They remain bound together by genuine affection that has been channeled into patterns that ensure none of them will ever be free to develop their full potential or to experience the kind of relationships that could offer genuine healing and transformation in the darkest hours before dawn, when the house is quiet and the chaos has temporarily subsided. The Watterson family continues to love each other in the only ways they know how, perpetuating cycles of dysfunction that feel like devotion, passing trauma from generation to generation in the name of family loyalty, and creating bonds so strong and so toxic that escape feels both impossible and treacherous. Their story becomes not a celebration of family resilience, but a cautionary tale about the ways that love itself can become a prison when it is built on foundations of unexamined wounds and unaddressed needs. Yet within this darkness, there remains the possibility that recognition of these patterns could become the first step toward healing, that understanding the mechanisms of generational trauma could provide the tools necessary to break cycles that have persisted across generations, and that love, when freed from the constraints of dysfunction, might yet become the force for genuine growth and healing that it was always meant to be. In the pre-dawn hours, when shadows lengthen across empty hallways and the fluorescent lights hum with the electrical whispers of institutional neglect, there exists an educational establishment that masquerades as a place of learning while serving as something far more sinister. A factory for the systematic destruction of young minds, creativity, and individual potential. Elmore Junior High School stands not as a beacon of knowledge and growth, but as a monument to institutional failure, a microcosm of all the ways that systems designed to nurture and protect children can instead become instruments of oppression, indoctrination, and psychological damage. To understand the true horror of what occurs within those seemingly innocent walls, we must first examine the leadership that sets the tone for every interaction, every policy, and every missed opportunity that defines the daily experience of education in Elmore. Principal Brown, the furry orange figure whose bumbling incompetence provides surface-level comedy, represents something far more troubling than simple administrative ineptitude. He embodies the complete abdication of adult responsibility in spaces where children are most vulnerable and most in need of guidance, protection, and genuine leadership. Principal Brown's failures extend far beyond mere bureaucratic confusion or well-intentioned mistakes. His inability to maintain order, his complete lack of understanding regarding child development and educational theory, and his consistent prioritization of his own comfort and convenience over student well-being create an environment where chaos reigns supreme, and children learn that the adults supposedly responsible for their care cannot be trusted to provide even basic safety, much less meaningful education. The principal's romantic obsession with Miss Simeon, his willingness to compromise student welfare in pursuit of his own personal desires, and his complete inability to recognize or address the obvious signs of teacher misconduct that occur daily under his supervision, reveal a level of professional negligence that borders on criminal. His office, which should serve as a sanctuary where troubled students can find help and guidance, instead becomes another source of unpredictability and potential harm, staffed by an adult whose own emotional and psychological needs have never been adequately addressed. The arbitrary nature of Principal Brown's decision-making, his tendency to implement policies based on whim rather than educational best practices, and his complete lack of consistency in addressing disciplinary issues, create an environment of learned helplessness among both students and staff. Children attending Elmore Junior High learn that authority figures are not sources of wisdom or protection, but rather obstacles to be navigated, manipulated, or simply endured until escape becomes possible. Miss Simeon represents an even more sinister aspect of the educational system's failure. The teacher, whose personal prejudices, unresolved psychological issues, and professional bitterness have transformed her from educator into active oppressor. Her blatant favoritism towards certain students, her cruel treatment of those she dislikes, and her complete disregard for professional ethics create a classroom environment that teaches children that fairness is an illusion, that authority is arbitrary, and that their worth as human beings depends entirely upon the whims of those who hold power over them. The psychological damage inflicted by Miss Simeon's teaching methods extends far beyond simple academic failure. Her public humiliation of students, her deliberate undermining of their confidence and self-esteem, and her modeling of adult behavior that is petty, vindictive, and cruel, provide daily lessons in how to abuse power and how to accept abuse as normal and expected. Children in her classroom learn not academic subjects, but far more troubling lessons about hierarchy, oppression, and the ways that those in positions of authority can use their power to inflict harm without consequence. Miss Simeon's particular hatred for Gumball reveals the most disturbing aspect of her professional misconduct: the targeting of specific children for systematic psychological abuse based on personal animosity rather than any legitimate educational concern. Her treatment of him demonstrates how easily the student-teacher relationship can become a vehicle for adult pathology to be projected onto vulnerable young minds, creating trauma that extends far beyond the classroom and into every aspect of a child's developing sense of self and worth. The grading system employed at Elmore Junior High reflects not academic standards or meaningful assessment of learning, but rather the arbitrary exercise of power disguised as objective evaluation. The inconsistent application of grading criteria, the use of grades as weapons of punishment rather than tools of feedback, and the complete disconnection between assessment and actual learning create an environment where students learn to game the system rather than to engage with knowledge in meaningful ways. The psychological impact of this corrupted assessment system cannot be overstated. Children who should be developing love of learning and confidence in their abilities instead learn that their value as human beings can be reduced to arbitrary symbols assigned by adults whose judgment cannot be trusted. The grades they receive become not measures of their understanding or growth, but reflections of their ability to navigate institutional politics and personal prejudices, skills that serve them poorly in developing genuine competence or self-worth. The competitive atmosphere fostered by the school's approach to grading creates additional psychological damage by teaching children that learning is a zero-sum game where one person's success requires another's failure. This distorts their relationship not only to education but to their peers, transforming potential collaborators and friends into rivals and enemies in a game where the rules are unclear and constantly changing. The cafeteria, that central gathering space where children should find nourishment for both body and spirit, instead serves as a daily reminder of institutional neglect and the ways that systems designed to care for children can become sources of literal and metaphorical poison. The questionable quality of the food served, the rushed and impersonal nature of mealtimes, and the complete lack of attention to creating an environment that supports healthy social interaction all contribute to an experience that teaches children that their basic needs are not priorities for the adults responsible for meeting them. The mystery meat and unidentifiable substances that regularly appear on cafeteria trays serve as perfect metaphors for the entire educational experience at Elmore Junior High. Nobody knows what they are receiving, nobody can be certain it is safe or beneficial, and everyone is expected to consume what they are given without question or complaint. The children learn to accept substandard care as normal, to suppress their natural instincts for self-preservation, and to mistrust their own judgment about what is healthy or harmful. The social dynamics that play out in the cafeteria reveal how the institutional failures of the school create cascading effects that poison every aspect of student life. Without adequate supervision or guidance from adults, children are left to establish their own hierarchies and social rules, often replicating the worst aspects of the adult behavior they observe in their teachers and administrators. Bullying flourishes in this environment, not because children are naturally cruel, but because they are learning from the examples set by the adults around them that power is meant to be used to harm and control others. The library, which should serve as a sanctuary of knowledge and quiet contemplation, instead becomes another space where institutional dysfunction manifests in ways that actively impede learning and intellectual development. The lack of adequate resources, the poor maintenance of existing materials, and the complete absence of programming designed to foster love of reading and research create an environment that teaches children that books and learning are not priorities worthy of investment or care. The underfunding that plagues every aspect of the school's operations reveals the broader societal failure to prioritize education and child welfare over other concerns. When textbooks are outdated, technology is obsolete, and basic supplies are scarce, children receive the clear message that their education is not valued by the adults who control the resources necessary for meaningful learning. They internalize this devaluation, learning to see themselves as unworthy of investment and to lower their expectations for what they deserve from the institutions that claim to serve them. The science laboratory, where children should be encouraged to explore, experiment, and develop critical thinking skills, instead becomes a place of danger and chaos, where safety protocols are ignored and learning objectives are subordinated to the entertainment value of explosions and dramatic demonstrations. The message communicated through this approach to scientific education is that knowledge is not about understanding the world but about creating spectacle, that learning is not a serious endeavor requiring discipline and care, but a form of entertainment that should be immediately gratifying and visually exciting. The gym classes that should teach children about physical fitness, teamwork, and healthy competition instead become exercises in humiliation and exclusion, where those who are naturally athletic are celebrated, while others are ignored or actively shamed for their limitations. Coach Russo's approach to physical education teaches children that worth is determined by physical prowess, that those who struggle deserve ridicule rather than support, and that the purpose of sports is to establish dominance rather than to develop skills and character. The field trips that should expand children's horizons and provide hands-on learning experiences instead become disasters that traumatize students and teach them that venturing beyond the familiar is dangerous and that the adults responsible for their safety cannot be trusted to protect them from harm. The consistent failure of these educational excursions creates lasting associations between learning and danger, between curiosity and punishment, between exploration and abandonment, by those who should provide guidance and support. The pattern of institutional failure extends to every aspect of school operations. From the broken heating and cooling systems that create physical discomfort that impedes learning, to the unreliable transportation that creates anxiety and unpredictability in children's daily routines, to the communication systems that fail to keep parents informed about their children's experiences and needs. Each failure, while seemingly minor in isolation, contributes to an overall environment that teaches children that institutions cannot be trusted, that adults are fundamentally unreliable, and that they must learn to fend for themselves in a world where the systems designed to support them are actively harmful. The guidance counseling services that should help children navigate academic challenges, social difficulties, and emotional struggles are either non-existent or staffed by individuals whose own psychological issues prevent them from providing meaningful support. Children with learning disabilities, mental health concerns, or family problems are left to struggle alone, learning that their difficulties are shameful secrets, rather than challenges that can be addressed with appropriate help and support. The extracurricular activities that should provide outlets for creativity, leadership development, and social connection instead become additional sources of stress and competition, where participation is determined by politics rather than interest or aptitude. The drama club, art programs, and student government opportunities teach children that creative expression and civic engagement are privileges to be earned through compliance and favoritism, rather than rights to be exercised and skills to be developed. The disciplinary system employed by the school reveals perhaps the most disturbing aspect of its institutional failure: the complete absence of restorative justice, meaningful consequences that promote learning and growth, or any understanding of child development and trauma-informed practices. Punishment is arbitrary, disproportionate, and often completely unrelated to the behavior being addressed, teaching children that justice is an illusion and that those in power can inflict harm without logic or accountability. The zero-tolerance policies that eliminate judgment, context, and individual consideration from disciplinary decisions create an environment where children learn that rules are more important than people, that bureaucratic compliance matters more than human needs, and that those in authority positions are not interested in understanding or helping them, but only in maintaining control through fear and punishment. These policies disproportionately impact children who are already struggling with trauma, learning differences, or family instability, creating a school-to-prison pipeline that begins in elementary school. The special education services that should provide individualized support for children with diverse learning needs instead become mechanisms for segregation and stigmatization, where differences are treated as deficits rather than variations in human neurodiversity. Children who think and learn differently are made to feel broken and defective rather than valued for their unique perspectives and abilities, creating lasting damage to their self-concept and their relationship to learning. The parent-teacher conferences that should foster collaboration between families and educators instead become exercises in blame and defensiveness, where children's struggles are attributed to failings at home, while the clome, school's role in creating or exacerbating problems, is never acknowledged or addressed. Parents learn that questioning school practices or advocating for their children's needs makes them difficult and unwelcome, while children learn that the adults in their lives cannot work together effectively on their behalf. The standardized testing that dominates the educational experience teaches children that their worth can be reduced to numerical scores, that learning is about producing correct answers rather than developing understanding, and that their individual growth and progress matter less than their ability to perform on arbitrary assessments designed by people who have never met them and who know nothing about their lives' interests or needs. The college and career preparation that should help children develop realistic plans for their futures instead creates anxiety and despair by presenting narrow definitions of success while failing to provide the actual skills, knowledge, and support necessary for children to pursue their goals. The message communicated is that most children are destined for failure, that opportunities are scarce and must be fought over rather than created, and that their dreams and aspirations are unrealistic fantasies rather than goals worthy of pursuit and support. The technology integration that should prepare children for a digital future instead exposes them to inappropriate content, cyberbullying, and privacy violations, while failing to teach them critical thinking skills necessary to navigate information responsibly. The computers and internet access become distractions rather than tools for learning, teaching children that technology is for entertainment rather than empowerment, and that digital literacy is about consumption rather than creation. The mental health support that should help children cope with the stresses of adolescence, family difficulties, and academic challenges is either completely absent or provided by individuals who lack the training and resources necessary to address complex trauma and developmental needs. Children learn that emotional struggles are signs of weakness rather than normal human experiences, that help is not available when they need it most, and that they must hide their pain rather than seek support. The social justice education that should help children understand inequality, develop empathy, and learn to advocate for positive change instead, either ignores these crucial topics entirely or presents them in ways that create guilt, defensiveness, and division rather than understanding and motivation for constructive action. Children graduate without the tools necessary to analyze and address the systemic problems they will encounter in their adult lives. In the fluorescent-lit hallways of Elmore Junior High, where dreams go to die and potential is systematically crushed beneath the weight of institutional indifference, the children continue to attend classes, complete assignments, and participate in the rituals of education, while learning lessons that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. They learn that authority figures cannot be trusted, that institutions serve themselves rather than the people they claim to help, that their individual needs and interests are irrelevant to the systems that control their daily lives. They learn that compliance is more important than understanding, that conformity is more valued than creativity, that their worth as human beings depends upon their ability to navigate arbitrary and constantly changing expectations set by adults whose own psychological and professional failures create chaos disguised as education. They learn that asking questions makes them difficult, that struggling means they are defective, that needing help is shameful, and that their dreams and aspirations are obstacles to be overcome rather than goals worthy of support. Most tragically of all, they learn that this is normal, that this is what they deserve, that this is the best they can expect from the world and from the adults who claim to care about their welfare. The damage inflicted by Elmore Junior High extends far beyond missed learning opportunities to encompass fundamental alterations in how children see themselves, their potential, and their place in a world that has demonstrated through daily example that their needs, dreams, and very humanity are secondary to the convenience and psychological comfort of the adults who hold power over them. In the pale light of dawn that filters through the windows of modest homes and struggling businesses, there exists a community of adults whose lives serve as cautionary tales wrapped in the mundane routines of suburban existence. The grown-ups of Elmore, those figures who should represent wisdom, stability, and the promise that maturity brings purpose and fulfillment, instead embody a catalogue of human failure so comprehensive and devastating that their very presence transforms the town into a museum of broken dreams and abandoned potential. To understand the true horror of adult life in Elmore, we must begin with Larry Needlemeyer, the orange construction worker, whose existence represents perhaps the most soul-crushing example of economic desperation disguised as work ethic. Larry's employment at what appears to be every business establishment in town is not a testament to his versatility or ambition, but rather a stark illustration of an economy so broken and exploitative that a single individual must work multiple jobs simply to survive, while never achieving anything approaching financial security or personal fulfillment. The sight of Larry behind the counter at the video store, manning the register at the grocery mart, serving food at various restaurants, and performing countless other service jobs reveals the grim reality of a working class that has been abandoned by any system of social support or economic justice. His perpetual exhaustion, his resigned acceptance of verbal abuse from customers, and his complete lack of hope for improvement in his circumstances paint a picture of modern labor that strips workers of dignity, agency, and the basic human right to pursue happiness. Larry's multiple employment situations expose the cruel mathematics of survival in a system where wages have been deliberately kept below living standards, where benefits are non-existent, and where workers are treated as disposable resources rather than human beings with needs, dreams, and inherent worth. His inability to achieve financial stability despite working what must amount to 70 or 80 hours per week demonstrates how the promise of the American dream has become a cruel joke played on those who cannot afford to see through. Déception. The psychological toll of Larry's existence becomes evident in his interactions with customers and co-workers, where years of exploitation and degradation have worn away any trace of the person he might once have been. His mechanical responses to abuse, his inability to advocate for himself or set boundaries, and his apparent acceptance of mistreatment as inevitable reveal a man whose spirit has been systematically destroyed by a system that profits from his desperation while offering nothing in return but the privilege of continued exploitation. The Robinson family represents a different but equally devastating form of adult failure, the bitter resentment of middle-class individuals who have achieved the material markers of success while discovering that those achievements bring neither happiness nor meaning. Gaylord and Margaret Robinson's perpetual anger at their neighbors, their obsession with property values and social status, and their complete inability to find joy in their comfortable suburban existence reveal the hollow core of conventional definitions of adult accomplishment. Their beautiful home, well-maintained lawn, and financial stability serve not as sources of contentment, but as prisons that trap them in lives of quiet desperation and envious rage. The Robinsons have followed every rule of middle-class propriety, have achieved every goal that society told them would bring happiness, and have discovered that success, as conventionally defined, is merely another form of failure, one that comes with the additional burden of having no one to blame for their misery but themselves. Gaylord's rage at the Watterson family's chaos stems not from genuine concern for neighborhood standards, but from his unconscious recognition that their joyful dysfunction exposes the emptiness of his own orderly despair. The Wattersons, for all their problems and instability, possess something that his conventional success cannot provide: genuine connection, spontaneous joy, and the ability to find meaning in love rather than achievement. His hatred for them is really hatred for his own life choices, projected onto neighbors whose very existence serves as a daily reminder of paths not taken and possibilities abandoned in pursuit of social approval. Margaret Robinson's participation in her husband's bitter campaign against their neighbors reveals how couples can become conspirators in their own misery, enabling each other's worst impulses while reinforcing patterns of behavior that ensure continued unhappiness for both partners. Their marriage has become a mutual suicide pact disguised as respectability, where each spouse's commitment to maintaining appearances prevents either from admitting the fundamental emptiness of their shared existence. The Robinson children, who exist peripherally in this household of restrained rage and disappointed expectations, are learning through daily example that adult life consists primarily of resentment, competition, and the careful maintenance of facades that conceal inner desolation. They are inheriting not wealth or wisdom, but the psychological patterns that will ensure their own future unhappiness, as they internalize messages about success, happiness, and human worth that guarantee continued cycles of striving without satisfaction. Sal Left Thumb presents yet another variation on the theme of adult failure. The criminal, whose attempts at rehabilitation are undermined by a society that refuses to allow genuine redemption or second chances. His past as a bank robber and his current struggles to maintain legitimate employment reveal the impossible bind faced by individuals seeking to escape cycles of crime and incarceration in a system designed to ensure their continued failure. The irony of Sal's situation lies in his apparent genuine desire to reform his life while being trapped in circumstances that make legal survival nearly impossible. His criminal skills, while socially destructive, represent genuine competence and expertise, yet society provides no mechanism for channeling those abilities into productive endeavors. Instead, he is condemned to perpetual marginalization, where his past defines his future possibilities and his attempts at legitimate work are met with suspicion, discrimination, and wages insufficient to support basic survival. Sal's story illustrates the broader failure of systems of justice and rehabilitation that claim to promote public safety while actually creating conditions that make recidivism nearly inevitable. The punishment continues long after the official sentence has been served, extending indefinitely through employment discrimination, housing restrictions, and social stigma that ensure formerly incarcerated individuals remain economically desperate and socially isolated conditions that virtually guarantee return to criminal activity as the only viable means of survival. The various shopkeepers and service workers throughout Elmore present a gallery of individuals whose dreams have been systematically crushed by economic realities that leave no room for personal fulfillment or creative expression. The owner of the donut shop, the manager of the electronics store, the clerks at various retail establishments all share the same defeated expression of people who once harbored hopes and ambitions, but have learned that survival requires the abandonment of any goals beyond meeting basic needs. These small business owners and employees represent the death of entrepreneurial spirit in an economic system that concentrates wealth and power while leaving local businesses to compete for scraps from corporate tables. Their establishments, shabby and struggling, serve communities that can barely afford their services while they themselves can barely afford to keep their doors open. The American dream of business ownership has become a nightmare of debt, stress, and the constant threat of bankruptcy. Mr. Small, the guidance counselor, whose New Age philosophy and spiritual practices should provide wisdom and support to struggling students, instead represents the pathetic spectacle of adult escapism disguised as enlightenment. His embrace of meditation, crystals, alternative medicine, and various mystical practices serves not as genuine spiritual development, but as elaborate defense mechanisms designed to avoid confronting the fundamental failures of the systems he participates in and his own inability to affect meaningful change. Small's spiritual bypassing allows him to maintain the illusion of wisdom and compassion, while avoiding the difficult work of actually helping the children in his care, or addressing the systemic problems that create their suffering. His feel-good platitudes and mystical pronouncements provide comfort to no one but himself, offering him a sense of superiority and purpose that requires no actual competence, results, or accountability. The tragedy of Mr. Small's situation lies not in his spiritual interests themselves, but in his use of those interests as substitutes for genuine engagement with the realities of his professional responsibilities. Children seeking guidance receive meaningless inspirational quotes rather than practical assistance, while their real problems are dismissed as illusions that can be overcome through positive thinking and proper chakra alignment. Coach Russo embodies yet another form of adult psychological failure: the use of aggressive masculinity and physical dominance as compensatory mechanisms for deep-seated insecurities and unresolved emotional trauma. His approach to physical education and athletics reveals not passionate dedication to health and fitness, but rather the desperate attempts of a man whose identity depends entirely upon his ability to intimidate and control others through displays of physical prowess and verbal aggression. The coach's treatment of students who struggle with athletics, his obvious favoritism toward those who excel in sports, and his complete inability to recognize the diverse ways that children can develop physical confidence and healthy relationships with their bodies, reveal an individual whose own relationship with physicality has been poisoned by toxic cultural messages about masculinity, competition, and worth. His coaching methods, which prioritize winning over development, intimidation over encouragement, and conformity over individual growth, ensure that most children will develop negative associations with physical activity and competitive sports that will last throughout their lives. The very activities that should promote health, teamwork, and personal challenge become sources of shame, anxiety, and lasting psychological damage under his guidance. The mayor of Elmore, whose corruption and incompetence should make him a figure of public outrage and political opposition, instead governs a community so demoralized and disengaged that his failures are met with resigned acceptance rather than demands for accountability. His obvious graft, his complete disregard for public welfare, and his use of municipal resources for personal benefit represent not aberrations in an otherwise functional system, but logical outcomes of a political process that has been abandoned by citizens who have learned that their participation changes nothing. The mayor's continued tenure in office, despite his obvious unfitness, reveals a community that has internalized the message that they deserve poor leadership, that corruption is inevitable, and that their voices and votes carry no real power to effect change. This learned helplessness extends beyond politics to encompass all aspects of civic life, creating an environment where public spaces decay, infrastructure fails, and community services deteriorate while residents simply adapt to increasingly diminished expectations. The adult residents of Elmore display a collective regression to childish behaviors and concerns that reveals the fundamental failure of conventional notions of maturity and psychological development. Their petty feuds, their inability to resolve conflicts through rational discussion, their tendency to respond to stress through tantrums and passive-aggressive behaviors, and their complete absence of genuine leadership or wisdom demonstrate that chronological age bears no necessary relationship to emotional or psychological growth. This widespread emotional infantilization among adults creates a community where children receive no meaningful guidance or modeling of mature behavior, leaving them to develop their own moral and social frameworks without benefit of adult wisdom or experience. The children of Elmore are essentially raising themselves in a community of adults who have never learned to be adults themselves, creating conditions that virtually guarantee the perpetuation of dysfunction across generations. The romantic relationships among Elmore's adults reveal patterns of codependency, manipulation, and mutual exploitation that serve as toxic examples for children learning what to expect from love and partnership. The marriages and relationships they observe are characterized by power struggles, emotional abuse, and the use of intimacy as a weapon rather than a source of support and growth. These dysfunctional relationship patterns become the templates that children will carry into their own future partnerships, ensuring continued cycles of relational trauma and disappointment. The workplace relationships throughout Elmore demonstrate how economic desperation transforms human connections into competitive battlegrounds, where cooperation is impossible and mutual support is seen as weakness. Co-workers undermine each other, supervisors abuse their authority, and customers treat service workers as subhuman obstacles to their convenience. The message communicated through these interactions is that human beings are primarily resources to be exploited, rather than individuals deserving of respect and consideration. The consumer culture that dominates adult life in Elmore reveals how the promise of happiness through material acquisition has become a cruel trap that keeps individuals focused on external solutions to internal problems while ensuring continued economic exploitation. The adults' obsession with purchasing goods they cannot afford, their status competitions over possessions rather than character, and their inability to find satisfaction in anything they acquire, demonstrate how consumer capitalism has perverted basic human needs for security, status, and self-expression into patterns of behavior that guarantee continued misery and debt. The healthcare system that serves Elmore's adults appears to be as broken and exploitative as every other institution in the community, leaving residents to manage serious medical and psychological conditions without adequate support or resources. The normalization of untreated mental illness, addiction, and chronic health problems creates an environment where suffering is expected and accepted rather than addressed, while the costs of treatment ensure that help remains available only to those who can afford it. The educational backgrounds of Elmore's adults suggest that their current circumstances are not the result of individual failures, but of systemic educational failures that left them unprepared for adult responsibilities and challenges. Their lack of critical thinking skills, their inability to analyze or address complex problems, and their susceptibility to manipulation and exploitation by those in positions of authority reveal the long-term consequences of educational systems that prioritize compliance over competence and memorization over understanding. The spiritual and philosophical emptiness that characterizes adult life in Elmore reflects a broader cultural failure to provide meaning, purpose, and ethical frameworks that could guide individuals through the challenges of contemporary existence. Without genuine belief systems, moral frameworks, or spiritual practices that offer real guidance and support, the adults drift through their days without direction or hope, seeking meaning in material acquisition, status competition, and the control of others. The parenting approaches observed among Elmore's adults range from neglectful to abusive, with most falling somewhere in the spectrum of well-intentioned incompetence that ensures children's needs remain unmet while parents maintain the illusion that they are providing adequate care. The lack of parenting education, support systems, and community resources leaves adults to replicate the same dysfunctional patterns they experienced as children, perpetuating cycles of trauma and neglect across generations. The community institutions that should provide support, resources, and opportunities for adult growth and development have either failed completely or being captured by interests that serve exploitation rather than empowerment. Churches, community centers, adult education programs, and civic organizations either do not exist or operate in ways that reinforce existing power structures rather than challenging them or providing genuine alternatives. The mental health and substance abuse issues that plague many of Elmore's adults remain largely unaddressed due to stigma, lack of resources, and the absence of comprehensive treatment systems that could provide genuine help and support. The normalization of psychological dysfunction and addictive behaviors creates an environment where seeking help is seen as weakness rather than wisdom, ensuring that problems persist and worsen over time. The aging process among Elmore's adults reveals not the accumulation of wisdom and experience that should characterize healthy human development, but rather the gradual accumulation of bitterness, resignation, and despair. The elderly residents appear not as respected sources of knowledge and guidance, but as warnings of what awaits those who survive long enough to see their dreams completely crushed and their potential utterly wasted. In the gathering dusk of another day in Elmore, as the adults return to their homes and apartments, their small businesses and service jobs, their failed relationships and abandoned dreams, they carry with them the weight of lives that have become monuments to systemic failure and individual capitulation. They are neither villains nor heroes, but casualties of economic, social, and cultural systems that have failed to provide the conditions necessary for human flourishing, leaving them to struggle through existences that offer neither meaning nor hope, while serving as cautionary examples for the children who observe their daily defeat and internalize the message that this is what it means to grow up, to become responsible, to accept the world as it is rather than as it should be. The adults of Elmore represent not the culmination of human development, but its systematic thwarting, not the achievement of maturity, but its prevention, not the reward of perseverance, but its punishment. They are the walking wounded of a society that has abandoned its responsibility to nurture human potential, leaving them to wander through suburban landscapes that promise everything while delivering nothing, forever seeking in consumption and competition and control what can only be found in connection, creativity, and the courage to imagine that life could be different than it is. In the hushed hours of twilight, when shadows gather around the edges of familiar things and transform them into mysteries that daylight cannot solve, there exists a story of metamorphosis so profound and disturbing that it challenges every assumption we hold about identity, authenticity, and the terrible price we pay for love that demands transformation rather than acceptance. The tale of Penny Fitzgerald, the peanut-shaped girl whose shell served as both protection and prison, reveals depths of psychological horror that transform a simple story of adolescent romance into a meditation on the violence that society inflicts upon those who dare to exist outside its narrow definitions of acceptable identity. To understand the true darkness that underlies Penny's journey from concealment to revelation, we must first recognize that her shell was never merely a physical characteristic or a quirky design choice, but rather a manifestation of the most fundamental human defense mechanism, the creation of a false self that can interface with a hostile world while protecting the vulnerable, authentic self that lies beneath. The shell represents every mask we wear, every persona we construct, every carefully curated version of ourselves that we present to others in the desperate hope that they will love the performance while never discovering the performer. The horror of Penny's situation becomes apparent when we consider that her shell was not chosen but imposed, not a temporary costume, but a permanent fixture that defined every aspect of her existence from birth. She never experienced the luxury of existing as her true self in the safety of private spaces. never knew the relief of dropping pretenses at the end of a difficult day, never had the opportunity to explore her authentic identity without the constant awareness that it was something that needed to be hidden from the world. The shell served as a barrier between Penny and direct experience of life itself. Every sensation was filtered through its hard surface. Every touch was mediated by its protective layer. Every interaction was shaped by the knowledge that others were responding to her shell rather than to whatever existed beneath it. This fundamental disconnection from direct experience created a form of existential imprisonment where the very thing that protected her from harm also prevented her from truly living. Patrick Fitzgerald's overprotective relationship with his daughter reveals the ways that parental love can become a form of psychological violence when it prioritizes the parent's anxiety over the child's development and autonomy. His desperate need to keep Penny safely contained within her shell was not motivated by genuine concern for her well-being, but by his own terror of losing control, his own inability to tolerate the uncertainty that comes with allowing another person to exist as themselves rather than as an extension of his own needs and fears. The forest community where Penny lived was structured around rigid hierarchies based on fairy tale archetypes and mythological categories that determined social status, romantic possibilities, and life opportunities in ways that had nothing to do with individual character, ability, or worth. This caste system, disguised as natural order, created an environment where beings like Penny existed in a state of perpetual uncertainty about their place in the social structure, never knowing whether they would be accepted or rejected based on revelations about their true nature. The pressure that Gumball placed upon Penny to remove her shell, while presented as romantic devotion and the desire for authentic intimacy, reveals itself upon closer examination to be a form of emotional manipulation that prioritized his own curiosity and desire for conquest over her autonomy and psychological safety. His inability to accept her as she was, his constant questioning of her concealment, and his implicit message that their relationship could not progress until she satisfied his need to see her true form, demonstrate the toxic masculine entitlement that treats women's boundaries as obstacles to be overcome rather than choices to be respected. Gumball's pursuit of Penny's transformation was driven not by love, but by possession, not by acceptance, but by the need to solve her like a puzzle, to claim credit for her revelation, to position himself as the hero who freed her from her prison, rather than recognizing that his pressure might itself be another form of imprisonment. His romantic narrative cast himself as liberator while casting her as victim, denying her agency in her own story, and reducing her complex relationship with her identity to a simple problem requiring his intervention. The episodes depicting Penny's shape-shifting abilities after her shell removal reveal not freedom but a different kind of imprisonment, where her authentic self proves to be not a fixed identity, but an unstable collection of possibilities that shift according to external pressures and internal emotional states. Her transformations, triggered by stress and strong emotions, demonstrate that the removal of one form of protection simply exposed her to different vulnerabilities, replacing the security of concealment with the chaos of uncontrolled revelation. The body horror aspects of Penny's transformations cannot be ignored or dismissed as mere fantasy elements. The sight of her form shifting without her conscious control, her flesh flowing and reshaping itself in response to psychological pressures, her apparent inability to maintain a stable physical identity, all point to a fundamental violation of bodily autonomy that should inspire revulsion rather than romantic interest. Her transformations represent not magical ability, but psychological fragmentation made manifest in physical form. The fairy tale creature hierarchy that governs social relationships in the forest reveals how mythological and literary categories can become oppressive social structures that limit individual potential and enforce conformity through the oppressive. Threat of exclusion and violence. Characters are expected to fulfill predetermined roles based on their species or magical nature rather than their individual personalities, desires, or capabilities, creating a system where authenticity becomes rebellion against cosmic order. Penny's uncertainty about her own nature within this hierarchical system reflects the broader psychological damage inflicted by societies that categorize human worth based on immutable characteristics rather than individual merit or character. Her fear that her true form might place her in an unacceptable category, might make her unworthy of love or social acceptance, reveals how classification systems designed to create order actually create anxiety, self-hatred, and the internalization of oppressive values. The revelation of Penny's shape-shifting nature positioned her not as a member of any particular fairy tale category, but as something that transcended and threatened those categories entirely. Her ability to become anything suggested that the rigid boundaries that defined social order were arbitrary and permeable, that identity itself might be more fluid and voluntary than the established system could tolerate. This positioning made her not just different but dangerous to the very foundations of her community's social structure. The romantic pressure placed upon Penny to maintain a stable form for Gumball's comfort reveals how even supposedly loving relationships can become mechanisms for enforcing conformity and suppressing authentic self-expression. Her efforts to control her transformations, to become the kind of girlfriend that Gumball could easily understand and categorize, required constant psychological effort and self-monitoring that transformed love into a form of work, rather than a source of joy and acceptance. The loss of her shell represented not just physical exposure, but the destruction of a lifetime's worth of psychological defenses and coping mechanisms. Penny had organized her entire sense of self around the reality of concealment, had developed her personality and social skills within the context of knowing that her true self was hidden, had learned to navigate the world through the safety of distance and indirection. The shell's removal left her psychologically naked and unprepared for the direct exposure that her new existence demanded. The community's reaction to Penny's transformation reveals the hypocrisy inherent in calls for authenticity and self-revelation. While society claims to value honesty and genuine self-expression, the reality of encountering someone's unfiltered truth often proves more disturbing and challenging than the comfortable predictability of social masks and conventional presentations. Penny's authentic self was too complex, too changeable, too challenging to categorical thinking for many to comfortably accept. The episodes where Penny struggles to control her shape-shifting demonstrate how the demand for authenticity can become just another form of performance pressure, where being true to oneself becomes a skill to be mastered rather than a natural state to be inhabited. Her efforts to achieve stability and consistency in her transformations reveal the paradox of trying to control one's authentic nature, of making genuineness itself into a form of artifice. The psychological impact of constant transformation extends far beyond the physical discomfort or social awkwardness that surface interpretations might suggest. Penny's inability to maintain a consistent physical form represents a fundamental disruption of the basic human need for continuity of identity and embodied experience. Her consciousness became trapped in a body that could not be relied upon to remain the same from moment to moment, creating a form of dissociative disorder where the self and the body existed in a state of perpetual disconnection. The romantic relationship between Penny and Gumball after her transformation reveals the disturbing dynamics that can emerge when one partner's identity becomes a project for the other to manage. understand, or fix. Gumball's attempts to help Penny control her shifting were well-intentioned but fundamentally possessive, based on the assumption that her natural state was problematic and required external intervention rather than internal acceptance and integration. The pressure to perform stability for the benefit of others' comfort placed Penny in the impossible position of having to suppress her authentic nature in order to maintain relationships, effectively recreating the same dynamic that her shell had originally served. The difference was that now the concealment was internal rather than external, psychological rather than physical, but no less restrictive or damaging to her sense of self and autonomy. The episodes, depicting Penny's family relationships after her transformation, reveal how her change affected not just her own identity, but the entire family system that had organized itself around her concealment. Her father's anxiety and overprotectiveness became even more pronounced when faced with a daughter whose very existence challenged his ability to predict and control her experiences, while her interactions with other family members shifted in ways that highlighted how much of their relationships had been mediated by the shell's presence. The school environment proved particularly challenging for Penny's post-transformation existence, as educational institutions are designed around assumptions of stable identity and predictable behavior that her shape-shifting nature fundamentally violated. Her transformations in response to academic stress, social pressure, and emotional triggers created disruptions that the school system was completely unprepared to handle, leading to policies and interventions that treated her natural responses as behavioral problems requiring correction. The dating relationship between Penny and Gumball became a laboratory for exploring the ways that romantic love can become a form of mutual surveillance and control when partners feel responsible for managing each other's psychological states rather than accepting them. Gumball's anxiety about Penny's transformations led to behaviors that were simultaneously protective and controlling, caring and possessive, supportive and undermining of her autonomy. The social dynamics among Penny's peer group shifted dramatically after her transformation, revealing how friendships based on shared experiences of concealment and social marginality can become unstable when one member of the group achieves a different form of visibility and acceptance. Her unique situation created distance from friends who still maintained their own forms of concealment, while also preventing full integration into groups that had never experienced the psychological complexity of hidden identity. The academic performance implications of Penny's condition demonstrate how shape-shifting in response to emotional stress can interfere with learning and intellectual development in ways that traditional educational approaches are completely unprepared to address. Her transformations during tests, presentations, and group work created barriers to demonstrating her knowledge and abilities that had nothing to do with her actual competence or preparation. The long-term psychological effects of living with uncontrolled shape-shifting include the development of hypervigilance around emotional states, the creation of elaborate strategies for managing internal experiences to prevent unwanted transformations, and the gradual erosion of trust in her own body and emotions. As reliable sources of information and guidance, Penny learned to fear her own feelings because they could trigger physical changes that would expose her internal states to external observation and judgment. The existential questions raised by Penny's condition extend far beyond the personal to touch upon fundamental philosophical issues about the nature of identity, the relationship between internal experience and external presentation, and the question of whether authenticity is possible or desirable in a world that punishes deviation from narrow norms of acceptable existence. Her story becomes a meditation on whether genuine self-expression is compatible with social belonging and whether love can exist without the demand for change. The medical and therapeutic resources available to help Penny manage her condition appear to be non-existent, reflecting broader societal failures to provide support for individuals whose experiences fall outside conventional categories of normal human existence. Her family and community are left to develop their own understanding and responses to her situation without benefit of professional guidance or established treatment protocols. The isolation that results from Penny's unique condition creates a form of existential loneliness that cannot be addressed through conventional social connections or romantic relationships. Her experience of transformation is so far outside normal human experience that she cannot fully share it with others, creating a barrier to intimacy that persists even in her closest relationships and leaves her fundamentally alone with the most important aspects of her existence. In the quiet moments when transformation subsides and form stabilizes temporarily, Penny exists in a space between selves, neither fully concealed nor completely revealed, neither entirely authentic nor wholly artificial, but something more complex and challenging than either pure truth or complete fiction. Her story becomes not a celebration of liberation from concealment, but a meditation on the terrible cost of visibility in a world that demands conformity while claiming to value authenticity, that insists upon truth while punishing those brave enough to reveal it. The shell that once protected her was also the shell that defined her, and its removal revealed not freedom, but a different kind of imprisonment, not authentic selfhood, but the discovery that authenticity itself might be impossible in a world where every form of being is subject to judgment, categorization, and the demand for explanation. In losing her shell, Penny discovered that the protection it provided was not merely physical but existential, and that some forms of safety, once lost, can never be recovered or replaced. In the liminal spaces between memory and forgetting, where consciousness dissolves into the static of unremembered dreams, there exists a realm so fundamentally terrifying that it challenges every assumption we hold about existence, identity, and the basic human right to be acknowledged as real. The void that lurks at the edges of Elmore's reality represents not merely a creative metaphor for how people fade from our lives, but rather the ultimate existential horror, a place where beings who were once integral to the fabric of reality find themselves literally erased from existence, consigned to a digital purgatory where they retain consciousness and memory while being systematically deleted from the awareness of everyone who once knew them. To understand the true nightmare of what occurs within this space between spaces, we must first examine the mechanics of how memory operates in Elmore's peculiar reality, where forgetting is not a gradual process of fading recollection, but a catastrophic systemic failure that can erase entire individuals from the collective consciousness of their community. Characters who were once friends, classmates, family members, or lovers can vanish so completely from the awareness of others that their former relationships become impossible to reconstruct, leaving gaps in memory that heal over so seamlessly that no one recognizes anything is missing. The horror lies not in the forgetting itself, but in the consciousness that persists despite the forgetting. The characters who find themselves consigned to the void retain their memories of the lives they once lived, the relationships they once cherished, and the identity they once possessed, while being forced to confront the terrible reality that from the perspective of everyone else in existence, they never were. They become living ghosts haunting a world that has expelled them not through death, but through something far more cruel, the systematic erasure of their ever having existed at all. Rob Needlemeyer's transformation from background character to void dweller to malevolent force represents the most comprehensively documented case of this existential catastrophe, providing a window into the psychological journey that transforms a forgotten soul into an agent of destruction and revenge. When Rob first became aware of his status as a forgotten character, When he recognized that his presence in scenes and interactions had been reduced to mere visual static, he was still capable of hope that his situation might be temporary, that someone might remember him, that his existence might be restored through effort or luck or the simple passage of time. The gradual realization that his forgetting was not accidental but systematic, not temporary but permanent, began the psychological deterioration that would eventually transform him from harmless background presence into active antagonist. The discovery that his erasure from memory was so complete that even searching for evidence of his former existence yielded nothing. No photographs, no records, no traces of his impact on the world, created a form of existential vertigo that challenged his fundamental understanding of what it means to be real. Rob's initial attempts to restore himself to memory through increasingly desperate attention-seeking behaviors reveal the psychological mechanisms that drive forgotten individuals toward violence and destruction as the only means of forcing recognition from a world that has systematically excluded them. When gentle reminders of his existence failed to penetrate the collective amnesia, when friendly interactions proved impossible because no one could remember having met him before, when even his own family members looked through him as if he were invisible, Rob discovered that negative attention was the only form of acknowledgement still available to him. The transformation from forgotten to actively malevolent occurred not through moral corruption, but through psychological necessity, when being remembered as a villain became the only alternative to complete non-existence, when causing pain and fear proved to be the only means of establishing that he was real and present in the world. Rob's embrace of evil was not a choice born of inherent malice, but a survival mechanism deployed by a consciousness faced with the alternative of accepting complete erasure from reality. The relationship between Rob and Gumball, which should represent the redemptive power of friendship to overcome cosmic injustice, instead becomes a meditation on the inadequacy of individual kindness to address systemic problems. Gumball's ability to remember Rob, while touching in its demonstration of loyalty and compassion, cannot restore Rob to the collective memory or repair the fundamental damage done by his extended exile from existence. The friendship offers temporary relief from the psychological torment of being forgotten, but cannot address the underlying mechanisms that created the forgetting in the first place. The episodes where Rob attempts to become a proper nemesis for Gumball reveal the tragic absurdity of someone trying to craft an identity and purpose from the scraps of recognition that being a villain provides. His efforts to embody traditional antagonist roles, his research into proper nemesis behavior, his attempts to create dramatic conflicts worthy of legendary heroes and villains, all demonstrate the desperation of someone trying to construct meaning and identity from the only materials still available to him. The cosmic cruelty of Rob's situation becomes most apparent when we recognize that his role as Gumball's nemesis, while providing him with acknowledgement and purpose, also traps him in a relationship defined by conflict and mutual harm rather than the genuine human connection he actually craves. His attempts to be the best possible enemy paradoxically demonstrate his continued capacity for care and dedication, channeled into the only form of relationship that the universe still permits him to have. Molly Collins's brief return from the void provides additional insight into the psychological landscape of forgotten existence and the mechanisms through which erasure operates in Elmore's reality. Her restoration to memory, temporary though it proved to be, demonstrated that forgetting in this universe operates according to rules that can theoretically be reversed, that the void is not necessarily a permanent sentence, but rather a form of storage from which beings can potentially be retrieved under specific circumstances. The tragedy of Molly's situation lies not in her initial forgetting, but in her re-erasure, the discovery that restoration to memory requires constant maintenance, and that without ongoing reinforcement, forgotten characters will inevitably slip back into non-existence. Her brief experience of being remembered again, of having her relationships and identity temporarily restored, made her subsequent return to the void infinitely more painful than her original erasure had been. Molly's interactions during her period of restoration revealed how the experience of being forgotten fundamentally alters a character's relationship to existence and memory. Her hypervigilance about being remembered, her desperate attempts to create memorable impressions on everyone she encountered, her obvious terror of saying or doing anything that might trigger another erasure, all demonstrated the psychological scarring that results from experiencing existential deletion and the way that trauma reshapes every subsequent interaction with reality. The mechanisms that govern which characters get forgotten and which remain in memory appear to operate according to principles that have nothing to do with moral worth, social contribution, or individual desire to exist. The arbitrary nature of erasure creates an environment of existential anxiety where any character might potentially find themselves consigned to the void without warning, reason, or recourse, transforming the simple act of being remembered into a form of cosmic lottery where the stakes are nothing less than continued existence. The other inhabitants of the void, glimpsed briefly in episodes that explore this realm of forgotten existence, represent a catalogue of lives interrupted, stories abandoned, and potentials never realized. These background figures, reduced to shadows and impressions of their former selves, demonstrate how forgetting operates not just on individual characters, but on entire categories of existence, erasing not just people but places, events, and entire narrative threads from the collective memory of Elmore's reality. The social hierarchy that emerges among the forgotten reveals how even in erasure, beings seek to create meaning and structure from their shared experience of non-existence. The relationships formed between void dwellers, built on mutual recognition of their shared fate and understanding of their unique circumstances, provide the only genuine community available to those who have been systematically excluded from the world of the remembered. The psychological coping mechanisms developed by long-term residents of the void range from complete withdrawal and catatonic depression to manic attempts to recreate the experiences of existence they have lost access to. Some forgotten characters spend their time obsessively reconstructing memories of their former lives, creating elaborate fantasies about friends and family who no longer remember them, while others embrace their erasure as liberation from the expectations and constraints that defined their previous existence. The physical environment of the void itself, with its shifting landscapes and unstable architecture, reflects the psychological state of its inhabitants, a realm where nothing can be trusted to remain consistent, where the basic laws of reality become negotiable, where the absence of external validation creates a space where individual will and desire can reshape the environment in ways that would be impossible in the more stable reality of the remembered world. The temporal aspects of existence in the void reveal additional layers of existential horror, as forgotten characters experience time differently than those who remain in memory. Without the anchoring effect of being remembered by others, without the external validation that comes from participating in shared experiences and collective memory, time becomes elastic and unreliable, stretching and contracting according to psychological rather than physical principles. The communication barriers between the void and the remembered world create additional challenges for forgotten characters who seek to re-establish contact with their former existence. Their words and actions, when they can manage to affect the world of the remembered at all, are filtered through layers of cosmic static that distort their intentions and make genuine communication nearly impossible, ensuring that their attempts at contact often create confusion and fear rather than recognition and reunion. The impact of the void's existence on the remembered world extends beyond the simple absence of forgotten characters to encompass subtle alterations in the fabric of reality itself. The gaps left by erased individuals create ripple effects that alter relationships, change the course of events, and shift the fundamental nature of existence in ways that the remembered cannot recognize or understand, leaving them with vague feelings of loss and incompleteness that they cannot explain or address. The philosophical implications of the void's existence challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the relationship between individual existence and collective recognition. If beings can be erased from memory while retaining consciousness, if existence depends upon acknowledgement by others rather than internal awareness of self, then the basic foundations of identity and reality become far more fragile and contingent than conventional understanding suggests. The episodes that explore the possibility of preventing or reversing forgetting reveal both the hope and the futility inherent in attempting to resist cosmic forces that operate according to rules that transcend individual will or effort. The techniques for strengthening memory, creating memorable impressions, and maintaining awareness of forgotten individuals prove to be temporary measures at best, capable of delaying but not preventing the inevitable slide into erasure that seems to be the ultimate fate of all existence in Elmore's reality. The relationship between creativity and memory in the context of the void suggests that forgotten characters may possess enhanced abilities to manipulate reality precisely because they exist outside the constraints that govern remembered existence. Their exclusion from collective memory liberates them from the consensus reality that limits the possibilities available to those who remain anchored in shared awareness, creating opportunities for reality manipulation that come at the cost of isolation and existential uncertainty. The recursive nature of forgetting in Elmore's universe, where characters can be forgotten by those who are themselves forgotten, creates infinite layers of erasure that extend the void's reach far beyond its apparent boundaries. The possibility that entire categories of existence might be forgotten by everyone, including other forgotten beings, suggests that the true scope of what has been lost to the void may be literally impossible to measure or comprehend. The moral questions raised by the void's existence become particularly acute when considering whether attempts to remember forgotten characters constitute genuine compassion or merely another form of exploitation. The process of restoration, even when successful, subjects forgotten beings to the scrutiny and judgment of those who erased them in the first place, potentially recreating the very conditions that led to their original forgetting, while requiring them to prove their worthiness of continued existence. The ultimate tragedy of the void lies not in its existence but in its necessity, the recognition that in a universe where attention and memory are finite resources, some individuals must inevitably be forgotten to make room for others to be remembered. The systematic nature of this forgetting suggests that erasure serves a function in maintaining the stability of reality, that the void exists not as a malfunction but as a feature of a system that requires regular deletion of excess data to continue functioning. In the deepest chambers of the void, where even the shadows of forgotten existence begin to fade into something approaching absolute nothingness, the consciousness that persists despite erasure confronts the ultimate question of whether existence has any meaning beyond recognition by others, whether identity can survive complete isolation, and whether the experience of being real depends upon anyone else acknowledging that reality. The answers that emerge from this confrontation with ultimate erasure provide no comfort, only the terrible knowledge that consciousness may persist long after every trace of meaning has been systematically deleted, leaving beings trapped in awareness without purpose, memory without validation, existence without acknowledgement forever. In the twilight hours, when the familiar rhythms of daily existence begin to blur and fragment, when the solid certainties that anchor our understanding of cause and effect start to waver like mirages in desert heat, there exists within the seemingly cheerful confines of Elmore a phenomenon so fundamentally disturbing that it transforms every moment of joy, every lesson learned, every relationship forged into nothing more than temporary illusions, subject to erasure without warning or explanation. The inconsistencies that plague the timeline of the amazing world of Gumball reveal not simple narrative oversights or creative flexibility, but rather evidence of a reality so unstable and unreliable that the very concepts of growth, consequence, and meaningful experience become meaningless in the face of a universe that operates according to principles that defy human understanding. To comprehend the true horror of temporal instability in Elmore, we must first examine the episodes where characters die in ways that should be permanent and traumatic, only to reappear in subsequent adventures with no acknowledgement of their previous demise and no explanation for their return to life. These deaths are not metaphorical or symbolic, but literal and graphic, depicting the termination of biological functions, the cessation of consciousness, and the apparent end of individual existence. Yet, they are followed by resurrection that occurs, not through divine intervention or advanced technology, but through the simple mechanism of narrative reset that treats death as nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. The psychological implications of living in a reality where death lacks permanence or meaning extend far beyond the simple comfort of knowing that loved ones might return from apparent destruction. When death becomes reversible, when the ultimate consequence can be undone through mechanisms that operate outside conscious control or understanding, the entire framework of moral decision-making collapses into meaninglessness. Actions lose their weight when consequences can be erased. Relationships lose their urgency when separation is never truly final, and existence itself becomes a hollow exercise in experiencing events that might be deleted from reality at any moment. The remote control episodes provide perhaps the most explicit demonstration of temporal manipulation in action, revealing a universe where the flow of time itself can be controlled, edited, and revised according to the whims of whoever happens to possess the appropriate technology. When Gumball and Darwin discover their ability to pause, rewind, fast forward, and selectively edit their experiences, they initially approach these powers with the enthusiasm of children who have discovered the ultimate toy, unaware that they are wielding forces that fundamentally alter the nature of reality itself. The ease with which the remote control can undo mistakes, skip boring moments, and revise unsatisfactory outcomes demonstrates that time in Elmore operates more like a recording than a lived experience, more like software than physics. The boys' ability to edit their lives suggests that their existence is not bound by the irreversible flow of cause and effect, but operates within a system where experiences can be saved, loaded, modified, and overwritten according to preference rather than necessity. Yet, the horror of temporal manipulation becomes apparent when we consider what happens to the experiences that are edited out of existence. When the boys rewind time to undo an embarrassing moment or fast forward through a tedious conversation, what becomes of the consciousness they possessed during those deleted experiences? Are those moments simply erased from existence, or do they continue to exist in some parallel timeline where the consequences of their actions play out despite being edited from the primary narrative? The remote control's ability to affect not just the boys' own experiences, but the entire reality around them suggests that their temporal manipulations create cascading effects throughout the universe, altering the lives and experiences of everyone they encounter without those individuals' knowledge or consent. When they rewind time to prevent a disaster, they simultaneously erase whatever growth or understanding might have resulted from living through that disaster, stealing from themselves and others the hard-won wisdom that comes from facing difficult experiences and surviving them. The future episodes that occasionally provide glimpses of dystopian outcomes for Elmore's residents demonstrate that the timeline instability cuts in both directions, affecting not only the past, but also potential futures that may or may not come to pass. These glimpses of alternate outcomes reveal realities where the characters' choices lead to catastrophic consequences, where their relationships deteriorate into bitter conflict, where their dreams and aspirations are crushed beneath the weight of systemic failure and personal inadequacy. The knowledge that such futures exist as genuine possibilities rather than mere speculation creates a form of existential anxiety that poisons every moment of happiness or contentment in the present. When characters celebrate achievements or enjoy peaceful moments together, the awareness that these positive experiences might be reversed or negated by future developments transforms joy into a temporary reprieve from suffering, rather than a genuine reason for hope or satisfaction. The episodes that reveal traumatic origins for various characters' situations demonstrate how the past itself remains subject to revision and reinterpretation, with backstories shifting between episodes in ways that suggest either deliberate concealment of truth or fundamental instability in the nature of historical fact. When characters' origins change between tellings, when their family histories are contradicted by subsequent revelations, when their formative experiences are revised or replaced without acknowledgement, the entire foundation of identity becomes suspect. Nicole's varying backstories provide a particularly disturbing example of this temporal instability, with her origins shifting from responsible student to delinquent rebel to overachiever to dropout depending on the narrative requirements of individual episodes. These contradictory histories cannot all be true simultaneously, yet each is presented with the same level of authenticity and emotional weight, suggesting that in Elmore's reality, the past is not fixed but fluid, subject to revision according to present needs rather than historical accuracy. The birthday episodes that reveal inconsistent aging patterns among the characters demonstrate that time itself does not progress uniformly or predictably in Elmore, with some characters aging while others remain static, with chronological relationships shifting between episodes, and with the passage of time itself becoming unreliable as a measure of change or development. When birthdays do not result in consistent aging, when characters can be simultaneously older and younger than each other depending on which episode serves as reference, the entire concept of linear time breaks down into incoherent chaos. Anais' intellectual development provides another example of temporal inconsistency, with her knowledge and abilities fluctuating between episodes in ways that suggest either dramatic cognitive changes or fundamental alterations in her character's basic parameters. Her genius-level intelligence sometimes manifests as sophisticated understanding of complex concepts, while in other episodes she displays ignorance or naivety that contradicts her established intellectual capacity, creating a portrait of a character whose core traits are subject to revision without explanation or justification. The relationship dynamics between characters suffer similar instability, with friendships, rivalries, and romantic connections shifting between episodes in ways that ignore previous developments and established relationship history. Characters who have shared profound bonding experiences in one episode may treat each other as strangers in the next, while others who have established patterns of conflict may suddenly display affection and mutual support that contradicts their established relationship dynamics. Gumball and Darwin's friendship itself becomes subject to these temporal irregularities, with their bond sometimes depicted as unbreakable and eternal, while other episodes explore scenarios where they grow apart, betray each other, or discover that their relationship was built on false foundations. The inconsistency in their relationship's portrayal suggests that even the central emotional core of the series exists within the same unstable reality that affects every other aspect of Elmore's existence. The school episodes demonstrate how educational progress and character development can be reset between adventures, with characters repeatedly learning the same lessons, making the same mistakes, and failing to retain knowledge or wisdom from previous experiences. The cyclical nature of these educational failures suggests that growth and learning may be illusory in a reality where progress can be undone and development can be reversed without notice or explanation. Miss Simeon's treatment of her students follows similar patterns of reset and repetition, with her attitudes and behaviors towards specific children shifting between episodes in ways that ignore established relationship dynamics and character development. Her conflicts with Gumball sometimes escalate into mutual understanding and respect, only to revert to their original antagonistic state in subsequent episodes without acknowledgement of previous resolution attempts. The episodes where characters acquire new abilities, learn important skills, or overcome significant personal challenges are often followed by subsequent adventures where those developments are completely ignored or reversed, suggesting that personal growth exists only within the context of individual episodes rather than as cumulative progress that builds over time. Characters repeatedly overcome the same fears, learn the same lessons, and make the same realizations without any indication that previous similar experiences have prepared them for current challenges. The neighborhood relationships and community dynamics display similar instability, with the social fabric of Elmore shifting between episodes in ways that suggest either constant upheaval or fundamental inconsistency in how relationships and social structures operate. Neighbors who are bitter enemies in one episode may be close friends in another, while community institutions and social norms change without explanation or acknowledgement of previous states. The economic circumstances of various families fluctuate between episodes in ways that ignore established financial situations and create contradictory portraits of characters' material conditions. The Wattersons' poverty is sometimes depicted as severe and limiting, while other episodes show them engaging in activities or possessing items that would be impossible given their established financial constraints, suggesting that even basic material reality is subject to revision according to narrative convenience. The physical geography of Elmore itself proves unstable, with locations appearing and disappearing between episodes, with the spatial relationships between familiar places shifting without explanation, and with entirely new environments being introduced, as if they had always existed despite never being previously mentioned or explored. This geographical instability extends the temporal inconsistencies into the physical realm, suggesting that space as well as time operates according to principles that prioritize narrative flexibility over logical consistency. The episodes where characters directly address the inconsistencies in their reality, where they notice and comment on the contradictions and impossibilities that surround them, provide moments of metatextual awareness that simultaneously acknowledge and dismiss the problems with temporal stability. These moments of self-awareness serve not to resolve the inconsistencies, but to highlight them while suggesting that the characters themselves are trapped within systems they cannot understand or control. The memory episodes that explore how characters remember past events reveal that recollection itself is subject to the same instabilities that affect lived experience, with memories changing between tellings and with different characters remembering the same events in contradictory ways. This suggests that not only are experiences subject to revision, but that the record of those experiences stored in consciousness is equally unreliable and mutable. The dreams and imagination episodes blur the boundaries between fantasy and reality in ways that suggest these distinctions may be meaningless in a universe where experienced events can be edited, deleted, or replaced without affecting the continuity of consciousness. When characters' internal experiences can manifest as external reality, when dreams can alter waking life, when imagination can reshape the physical world, the concept of objective reality becomes impossible to maintain. The holiday episodes that should provide markers of temporal progression instead reveal how time loops and cycles in ways that prevent genuine forward movement or development. Characters celebrate the same holidays repeatedly without aging or changing, experience the same seasonal patterns without accumulation of wisdom or experience, and participate in annual traditions that feel both familiar and eternally present, rather than part of a linear progression through time. The family history episodes that should provide stable foundations for character understanding instead reveal how past events are subject to reinterpretation and revision, with family lore changing between tellings and with established historical facts being contradicted by subsequent revelations. The instability of family history suggests that identity itself, built as it is on understanding of origins and background, becomes impossible to establish on solid foundations when the past is subject to constant revision. The episodes where characters attempt to change their circumstances through effort and determination often end with their situations reverting to original states, despite their success in achieving their goals, suggesting that improvement and progress are temporary illusions that will inevitably be undone by forces beyond individual control. This pattern of achievement followed by reset creates a nightmarish scenario where effort and growth are meaningful only within the context of individual episodes before being erased by the next narrative reset. The technology episodes that introduce new devices or systems capable of altering reality demonstrate how the tools that should provide characters with agency and control over their circumstances instead become additional sources of calm instability that can reshape their experiences in unpredictable ways. The remote controls, wish-granting objects, and reality-altering devices that appear throughout the series suggest that the universe itself provides mechanisms for revising experience while offering no guidance on how to use these tools responsibly or effectively. In the deepest hours of night, when the boundaries between sleeping and waking become indistinct and the familiar world transforms into something strange and unknowable, the residents of Elmore continue their daily routines, while trapped within a reality where nothing can be trusted to remain constant, where every relationship might be reset without warning, where every achievement might be undone by forces beyond comprehension or control. They live and love and struggle and grow, while suspended in a temporal matrix that renders all their efforts potentially meaningless, all their connections potentially temporary, all their experiences potentially subject to deletion or revision, according to principles they cannot understand or influence. The horror lies not in the instability itself, but in the consciousness that persists through every reset, every revision, every temporal manipulation, carrying forward the awareness of what has been lost or changed, while being unable to prevent future alterations or to establish any foundation of certainty upon which to build meaning or hope. They are prisoners of their own existence, forever experiencing life, while never being certain whether those experiences will be allowed to matter, forever forming bonds, while never knowing whether those connections will survive the next narrative reset, forever growing and learning, while suspecting that all progress might be illusory and all wisdom temporary, in a universe where time itself has become nothing more than another tool for editing reality according to the whims of forces that remain forever beyond their understanding or control. In the witching hours, when darkness presses against windows like a living thing, and the familiar sounds of suburban comfort fade into an unsettling silence that seems to pulse with its own malevolent rhythm, there exists within the boundaries of Elmore a cosmic truth so fundamentally disturbing that it transforms every moment of apparent normalcy into evidence of a universe governed not by natural laws or divine providence, but by a cruel and arbitrary intelligence that delights in the suffering of conscious beings while maintaining the facade of benevolent order. The random catastrophes that plague this seemingly innocent community, the supernatural interventions that consistently favor chaos over justice, and the technological impossibilities that operate according to principles that mock human understanding all point to a reality where the universe itself has become an active participant in the psychological torture of its inhabitants. To comprehend the true scope of cosmic malevolence that permeates every aspect of existence in Elmore, we must first examine the pattern of natural disasters that strike the town with suspicious frequency and surgical precision, targeting not the cruel or corrupt, but the innocent and vulnerable in ways that suggest deliberate selection rather than random misfortune. Earthquakes that crack open the ground beneath children's playgrounds while leaving administrative buildings untouched. Floods that destroy family homes while mysteriously avoiding corporate headquarters. Tornadoes that seem to follow the Watterson family, specifically through their daily routines. These are not coincidences or examples of particularly bad luck, but evidence of environmental forces that operate with consciousness, intention, and a profound cruelty that delights in creating maximum psychological damage while maintaining plausible deniability. The timing of these catastrophes reveals their true nature most clearly, arriving not during moments of happiness or contentment when their contrast might be most stark, but precisely when their victims are most vulnerable, most in need of stability, most desperate for the universe to provide some small measure of kindness or justice. The earthquake that destroys the Wattersons' home comes not when they are financially secure and emotionally prepared to handle such a crisis, but when they are already struggling with unemployment, relationship stress, and the accumulated trauma of previous disasters, ensuring that each new catastrophe compounds rather than replaces the suffering that preceded it. The weather patterns that govern Elmore operate according to principles that seem specifically designed to frustrate human planning and destroy the simple pleasures that make existence bearable. Rainstorms arrive precisely when outdoor activities have been planned. Blizzards strike during crucial travel periods. Heat waves emerge during power outages, and beautiful weather appears only when characters are trapped indoors by circumstances beyond their control. This meteorological malice suggests an atmosphere that responds not to pressure systems and seasonal patterns, but to the emotional states and hopes of the town's residents, providing perfect conditions only when they cannot be enjoyed and unleashing destruction precisely when it will cause maximum despair. The geological instability that characterizes Elmore's foundation extends beyond simple tectonic activity to encompass a landscape that seems to reshape itself according to psychological rather than physical principles. Sinkholes open beneath the feet of characters at their moments of greatest vulnerability, Cliffs crumble when climbers are most dependent upon their stability, and solid ground transforms into quicksand when escape routes are most desperately needed. The earth itself becomes an active antagonist, offering no reliable foundation upon which to build security, stability, or hope for the future. The universe's apparent consciousness reveals itself most clearly in the way that prayers, wishes, and desperate pleas for help are not simply ignored, but actively perverted into sources of additional suffering. When characters reach the depths of despair and turn to whatever cosmic forces might govern their reality, their appeals for mercy or justice are answered, not with relief, but with cruel parodies of what they have requested, gifts that carry hidden costs far exceeding their apparent benefits, or solutions that create problems far worse than those they were meant to address. The wish-granting episodes demonstrate this cosmic sadism with particular clarity, showing how the universe delights in providing exactly what characters ask for while ensuring that they suffer for receiving it. Wishes for popularity result in obsessive attention that becomes suffocating and dangerous. Desires for wealth lead to money that carries curses or obligations that destroy family relationships, and requests for power grant abilities that inevitably corrupt or isolate those who possess them. The universe operates like a malevolent genie, technically fulfilling requests while ensuring that every wish granted becomes a source of regret and suffering. The supernatural elements that occasionally manifest in Elmore reveal a spiritual dimension that offers no comfort, wisdom, or transcendence, but rather additional layers of existential terror, disguised as mystical experience. Ghosts that appear are not wise ancestors offering guidance, but confused and malevolent spirits that drag the living into their own unresolved trauma. Magical objects that promise transformation deliver only additional forms of imprisonment, and mystical experiences serve not to expand consciousness, but to reveal disturbing truths about the fundamental hostility of existence itself. The holiday episodes, which should represent opportunities for joy, family bonding, and spiritual renewal, instead become annual reminders of the universe's commitment to disappointing those who dare to hope for happiness or meaning. Christmas presents that malfunction or transform into sources of conflict, birthday celebrations that descend into chaos and recrimination, and seasonal festivities that attract disasters with clockwork regularity, all demonstrate how even the most innocent attempts at celebration are met with cosmic disapproval and systematic destruction. The technology that exists within Elmore operates according to principles that seem specifically designed to frustrate human needs while providing the illusion of progress and empowerment. Electronic devices fail at crucial moments. Communication systems break down when connection is most desperately needed. Transportation, vehicles, malfunction when their reliability is literally a matter of life and death, and labor-saving appliances create more work and stress than they eliminate. This technological malevolence suggests a universe where even inanimate objects are enlisted in the cosmic conspiracy to ensure maximum human suffering, disguised as convenience and advancement. The medical and emergency services that should provide safety nets for crisis situations instead operate as additional sources of danger and trauma, with ambulances that arrive too late or get lost en route to emergencies, hospitals that provide treatment worse than the conditions they were meant to address, and emergency responders who create additional chaos rather than resolving existing problems. The systematic failure of these protective institutions reveals a universe that not only refuses to provide help during crises, but actively sabotages the systems that humans create to help themselves. The educational system's failures extend beyond mere institutional incompetence to encompass what appears to be deliberate sabotage of human potential and intellectual development, curricula that teach misinformation, teachers who actively discourage learning and critical thinking, and assessment methods that punish understanding while rewarding conformity, all suggest an educational establishment that serves not human development, but the universe's apparent commitment to maintaining ignorance, dependency, and psychological fragmentation among its victims. The economic forces that govern survival in Elmore operate with a cruelty that transcends mere market dynamics to approach cosmic punishment for the sin of existing while poor. Jobs disappear precisely when families most need income, prices increase exactly when budgets are tightest, and economic opportunities present themselves only to those who lack the resources to take advantage of them. The systematic nature of this economic oppression suggests not the invisible hand of the market, but the very visible fist of a universe that delights in grinding the vulnerable beneath the machinery of artificial scarcity and engineered desperation. The social dynamics that emerge from this cosmic hostility reveal how entire communities can become unwitting collaborators in their own oppression, developing cultural norms and interpersonal patterns that amplify rather than mitigate the suffering that external forces impose upon them. Neighbors turn against each other during crises rather than working together. Communities fragment under pressure rather than finding strength in unity, and social institutions that should provide mutual support instead become additional sources of competition, conflict, and isolation. The family structures that should offer refuge from cosmic indifference instead become pressure cookers where external stresses are concentrated and amplified, turning love into possessiveness, protection into control, and care into codependency. The universe's assault on individual psyches creates family dynamics where members compete for scarce emotional resources rather than supporting each other, where trauma is transmitted from generation to generation rather than healed through connection, and where the bonds that should provide strength become chains that ensure continued vulnerability to external manipulation. The communication breakdowns that plague relationships in Elmore reveal how the universe actively interferes with human connection, ensuring that important conversations happen at the worst possible times, that crucial information is lost or distorted during transmission, and that moments of potential understanding and reconciliation are sabotaged by perfectly timed interruptions or misunderstandings. These communication failures are too consistent and too perfectly destructive to be attributed to normal human limitations or coincidence. The legal and justice systems that should provide fair resolution of conflicts and protection of rights instead operate as additional mechanisms for punishing the innocent while protecting the guilty, ensuring that those who most need legal protection are least likely to receive it, while those who abuse their power face no meaningful consequences for their actions. This systematic inversion of justice suggests a universe where moral order itself has been perverted to serve malevolent rather than beneficial purposes. The transportation systems that should connect communities and enable freedom of movement instead become traps that isolate individuals and families during their times of greatest need. Vehicles break down when escape is most crucial. Public transportation fails during emergencies, and travel routes are blocked by obstacles that appear with suspicious timing and persistence. This systematic failure of mobility suggests a universe committed to ensuring that its victims remain trapped within whatever circumstances provide maximum opportunities for suffering. The entertainment and media systems that should provide respite from daily struggles instead deliver content specifically designed to increase anxiety, promote unrealistic expectations, and model dysfunctional behaviors that viewers will unconsciously replicate in their own lives. The systematic nature of this psychological programming suggests media systems that serve not human enjoyment or enlightenment, but cosmic purposes that benefit from maintaining populations in states of confusion, dissatisfaction, and emotional instability. The environmental degradation that slowly poisons the air, water, and soil of Elmore reveals a planet that is being systematically made uninhabitable for conscious life, not through human negligence alone, but through cosmic indifference to the suffering that environmental destruction creates. The timing and targeting of pollution, the failure of cleanup efforts, and the resistance of environmental damage to remediation all suggest forces beyond human control that actively work to ensure that the basic necessities of life become sources of illness and death. The sleep patterns and dream experiences of Elmore's residents reveal how even the refuge of unconsciousness provides no escape from cosmic malevolence. With nightmares that predict future traumas, insomnia that strikes during periods when rest is most needed, and sleep disturbances that ensure chronic exhaustion and reduced psychological resilience. The systematic interference with restorative sleep suggests a universe determined to prevent recovery from daily trauma while ensuring maximum vulnerability to future assaults. The aging processes that affect different characters reveal how time itself has become weaponized against human dignity and happiness, with some individuals aging rapidly while others remain frozen in states of immaturity, with physical decline that outpaces emotional development, and with the accumulation of years bringing not wisdom but increasing vulnerability to manipulation and abuse. This distortion of natural aging patterns suggests temporal forces that serve suffering rather than growth. The artistic and creative expressions that should provide meaning and beauty instead become sources of frustration and failure, with inspiration that arrives only when materials are unavailable, with technical skills that deteriorate precisely when they are most needed, and with audiences that appreciate work only after creators have abandoned their efforts in despair. This systematic sabotage of human creativity suggests a universe that recognizes art and beauty as threats to its program of systematic demoralization. The romantic relationships that should provide emotional support and companionship instead become psychological battlegrounds where partners unknowingly collaborate in each other's destruction, with love that transforms into possessiveness, intimacy that enables abuse, and commitment that becomes imprisonment. The systematic perversion of romantic connection suggests cosmic forces that understand love's power to provide meaning and resistance to suffering, and that therefore work to ensure that love becomes another source of pain rather than healing. The community institutions that should provide stability and support instead operate as additional sources of bureaucratic torture, with services that are available only to those who do not need them, with procedures that change without notice to ensure maximum frustration, and with officials who seem specifically trained to inflict humiliation and despair upon those seeking help. This systematic institutional failure suggests not mere incompetence but deliberate design to ensure that human systems mirror cosmic hostility. The medical and mental health systems that should provide healing instead become additional sources of trauma, with treatments that create new problems while failing to address existing ones, with diagnostic procedures that are more harmful than the conditions they investigate, and with therapeutic interventions that increase rather than reduce psychological suffering. This systematic failure of healing systems suggests a universe where even attempts to alleviate suffering are transformed into mechanisms for creating more of it. In the darkest hours before dawn, when the weight of accumulated suffering presses down upon the sleeping town like a physical force, and the very air seems thick with malevolent intent, the residents of Elmore continue their daily routines while trapped within a reality that operates as a vast engine designed for the production of conscious suffering. They wake each morning not to face random challenges or natural difficulties, but to participate in a cosmic experiment where their pain serves purposes they cannot understand, and their hope provides fuel for mechanisms of torture that operate beyond their ability to comprehend or resist. The universe watches their struggles with what can only be described as satisfaction, adjusting conditions to ensure maximum psychological damage while maintaining the illusion that relief might be possible, that effort might be rewarded, that justice might eventually prevail. It is a cosmic gaslighting operation of unprecedented scope and cruelty, where victims are encouraged to blame themselves for their suffering while the true source of their pain operates beyond their awareness, beyond their ability to confront or challenge, beyond any hope of escape or resolution, except through the final mercy of death itself. And even that mercy may be denied to those who serve the universe's inexplicable appetite for conscious suffering most effectively. As we reach the end of our journey through Elmore's darker corridors, remember that these theories, however unsettling, reflect the complexity that makes great storytelling endure beyond its intended audience. The amazing world of Gumball succeeds not despite these darker implications, but because of them. It acknowledges that childhood is not innocent, that families are complicated, and that growing up means confronting uncomfortable truths about the world we inhabit. Perhaps the real beauty lies not in dismissing these interpretations, but in recognizing how a show designed for children can speak to universal experiences of isolation, identity crisis, and the search for meaning in a chaotic world. The simulation theory that questions the nature of reality itself mirrors our own digital age anxieties about authenticity and connection. Darwin's existential horror of transformation echoes every immigrant's struggle with identity and belonging. The Watterson family dysfunction reflects the cycles of generational trauma that plague countless households, while their love persists despite their damage. The failing educational system that crushes creativity speaks to the institutional betrayals that mark so many childhoods. The broken dreams of Elmore's adults serve as warnings about what happens when societies abandon their responsibility to nurture human potential. Penny's shell represents every mask we wear to protect ourselves from a world that demands conformity while claiming to celebrate individuality. The void where forgotten characters disappear touches the deepest human fear of being erased from memory and meaning. The unstable timeline reflects our growing awareness that progress is not guaranteed, that growth can be undone, that the stories we tell ourselves about linear development might be comforting lies. The universe's cruel indifference speaks to the cosmic loneliness that haunts every conscious being, trying to find purpose in an existence that offers no guarantee of meaning or justice. These dark theories do not diminish the show's value, but rather illuminate its true sophistication. Like all enduring art, Gumball works on multiple levels, offering surface entertainment while encoding deeper truths about the human condition. Children laugh at the colorful chaos while unconsciously absorbing lessons about resilience. Adults recognize their own struggles reflected in cartoon form, and both audiences find comfort in the fundamental message that even in the darkest circumstances, connection and love remain possible. The Wattersons, for all their flaws and the darkness that surrounds them, continue to love each other and face each new day with resilience that borders on the heroic. Their dysfunction is real, but so is their affection. Their world is unstable, but their bonds endure. Their universe may be malevolent, but their capacity for joy and connection transcends cosmic cruelty. In this persistence of love despite impossible circumstances lies perhaps the show's most profound truth, that meaning is not found in perfect conditions or fair treatment, but in the choice to continue caring for each other regardless of what forces conspire against that caring. The blue cat who dreams of greatness while trapped in suburban mediocrity. The goldfish who became a boy through love and cosmic accident. The baby genius who carries adult responsibilities. The parents whose damage somehow creates rather than destroys family bonds. These characters resonate because they reflect our own struggles with identity, belonging, and the gap between our aspirations and our realities. Their adventures in Elmore's surreal landscape mirror our navigation of a world that often seems designed to thwart human flourishing while demanding that we find ways to thrive anyway. Rest now, knowing that even in the darkest theories, there remains the fundamental truth that connection, however imperfect, provides light in the void. The laughter continues, even when we understand what lies beneath it. And perhaps that understanding makes the joy more precious rather than less. The show's willingness to encode adult anxieties within children's entertainment creates a unique form of intergenerational communication, where parents and children can share the same stories while experiencing different layers of meaning. In recognizing these darker interpretations, we do not rob the show of its innocence, but rather acknowledge its wisdom. The best children's literature has always carried shadows alongside its light, has always prepared young minds for the complexities they will encounter, while providing them with models of resilience and connection that can sustain them through difficult times. The amazing world of Gumball joins this tradition by creating characters who face impossible circumstances with humor, creativity, and unwavering commitment to each other. Sleep well, traveler, and dream of blue cats who find family in the strangest places, of suburban neighborhoods where love persists despite cosmic indifference, of children who learn that growing up means not abandoning hope but finding new reasons to hope despite everything they discover about the world's capacity for cruelty and injustice. Dream of stories that trust their audiences enough to encode darkness alongside light, complexity alongside simplicity, truth alongside comfort. Dream of laughter that acknowledges pain without being diminished by it, of connections that survive every attempt to break them, of meaning that emerges not from perfect circumstances, but from the choice to continue seeking it, despite imperfect ones. The theories we have explored tonight serve not to destroy wonder, but to deepen it, not to eliminate joy, but to make it more intentional, not to discourage love, but to celebrate its power, to persist in the face of forces that would destroy it. In the morning, when the shadows retreat and the familiar world reasserts its daytime logic, these darker truths will fade like dreams, but their wisdom will remain the knowledge that even the most innocent-seeming stories can carry profound insights about what it means to be human in a world that offers no guarantees except the opportunity to choose, again and again, connection over isolation, hope over despair, love over fear.